Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku had the power of symbol part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story, Sarahdeo from AO3. So let's start the video. Third-person perspective. 3 boys are hanging out at the mall, and one green-haired boy suddenly stops at a keychain stand. His eyes widen, and he starts to look at all the keychains when he comes across one keychain specifically. It was his favorite fictional hero from when he was a child. 𝗂𝐭𝐴. It's an All Might keychain, so how about we get one to match each other? A boy with blonde spiky hair and red eyes looked at the boy and raised an eyebrow. His name was 𝗬𝗓𝗏, but the greenette called him 𝗂𝐭𝐴. He took his hands out of his pockets, grabbed the keychain, and threw it on the ground. There's no way in hell I will ever match with a nerd like you. Izuku Midoriya, standing at average height with a lean, muscular build, has messy green hair that sticks up in various directions, with darker green shadows beneath his eyes. His large, round eyes are bright green, and his facial features often reflect his kind and earnest personality. His large green eyes widened at that statement and backed away. He apologized as one of his other friends approached the stand and held one of the keychains. His name was Shoto Todoroki, and his hair was evenly split down the middle, with the right side pure white and the left side bright red. He spoke smoothly as the keychain jingled softly in his hand. "Midoriya, you like All Might." Izuku nodded happily and smiled widely, and in the end, they all got the keychain. After an hour, they all left the mall, and Izuku bought many All Might figures, while Katsuki and Shoto left with one t-shirt. Izuku took out the keychain to admire it more when it suddenly started glowing, and the tag said, "Say Sunlight Prism Power Makeup." Sunlight Prism Power Makeup. Izuku's hair and clothes started to illuminate, his nails changed to dark green, and he had green eyeliner around his eyes. The All Might keychain floated up to his chest, turning into sparkles on his face. His shirt was now a white shirt with green overall bands and a small red tie, and his hands were glove white and green finger gloves with a diamond shape resting above it to shape it all together nicely. He stomped onto the solid ground, turning his shoes into red boots. He had frilly white socks to go along with the shoes, then he turned around, and a green sparkly waist cape went down to his lower limb. Katsuki and Shoto watched this and were shocked about what was happening to the greenette. Shoto looked very worried and debated tackling him to the ground to save him, but when he saw Izuku smiling and the glitter coming out, he decided not to. Izuku closed his eyes, and earrings with a green bunny linked with an orange and red explosion appeared when the sparkles closed onto his ears. He then finished off with a cute pose. Izuku looked at his clothes and gloves, shocked but in awe of what had just happened. Izuku then spoke up, causing Katsuki and Shoto to snap out of their thoughts. "That was against my will." Katsuki looked down at his keychain, threw it on the ground, and started stomping while Shoto closely inspected it. "Deku, I told you not to buy these DMN keychains," Katsuki said furiously when his keychains started glowing, and he stared at it in disbelief. Katsuki spoke up, "Since when was there something that tells me to say Moon Prism Power Makeup?" Katsuki's nails were painted orange. The same color was now eyeliner on his eyes. Under his left eye were 3 small orange stars. He then grabbed the now smushed All Might keychain and squeezed it so hard that it looked like the eyes were spilling out of its sockets. It was like explosions came out of the keychain and surrounded his arms and body. The mini explosions reached his ears, and an orange diamond was linked with a silver moon on the bottom. Then a bow wrapped around his waist, and arm-length gloves popped onto his arms and hands in a single explosion, and a sleeveless shirt with a diamond in the middle of it was also there. The gloves had orange strings attached to them that complemented his nails. Then orange boots popped onto his feet, replacing the black Crocs he wore. Soon, an orange sparkly waist cape draped onto his side down to his feet, and as the transformation finished, Katsuki held up his fist to his face and stared at Izuku like he was about to kill him. "Someone is dying today," Katsuki said, snickering. Izuku had a worried expression as he backed up. "It's not me, right?" Izuku said, and Shoto pulled out his phone to take a picture of Katsuki in his new attire. He kept his face neutral as he took the photo, but inside he was dying of laughter. Izuku and Katsuki looked at Shoto as if they were waiting for something. Shoto looked at Katsuki and Izuku, then put away his phone when he suddenly spoke up. "Oh right. Since I have a keychain too, I should be transforming soon. But it isn't even glowing yet." Shoto looked slightly sadder when he realized that the keychain hadn't started glowing yet, and just as he was thinking, the keychain started glowing. Shoto's lips curled into a small smile as he read what was said on the tag. Star Power Makeup. Ice shards circled him until it was like he was frozen in ice. Soon, the ice shattered into small pieces, falling onto the ground like snow. Dark blue eyeliner was sharply painted onto his eyes, and under his left eye was an outline of a star. He had the same star on his right eye, except it was filled with a lovely dark blue shade. Shoto twirled the keychain around with his pointer finger and threw it to the sky. Snow fell, and dark blue finger gloves were on his hands. A piece of snow landed on his forehead, a dark blue diamond shape appeared, and thick strings were attached to his head to make it secure. His top was a button-up shirt, one half dark blue, and the other pure white. Then snow circled his feet, and dark blue boots appeared. The snow circling his feet was making its way up to his ears. The snow hardened and had a dark blue diamond linked with a yellow star. The shards from earlier floated to his waist, and a sparkly blue waist cape was now falling down his hips. Then the transformation ended, and Shoto spoke up with a neutral face while looking down at his new clothes and admiring them. "I'm a pretty prince, just like the rest of you." Katsuki was pissed off and wasn't even paying attention to what Shoto even looked like. All he was doing was trying to take off his clothes, which he did not like. Izuku rubbed his temple and sighed softly. He was trying to figure out what they would do now that they were dressed up like this and how they would transform out of it. "So you're telling me we transformed into this because we got these All Might keychains? Do we have special powers like the heroes in the fictional show I watched when we were younger? Or did someone prank us and somehow get these clothes onto us?" "No. That wouldn't be possible since there was glitter, explosions, and snow that came from nowhere." Izuku got cut off by Katsuki, and Katsuki raised his fist and put it to Izuku's face. "Shut the hell up, Deku. I'm already pissed off about these clothes, and I do not want to hear your stupid rambling right now." Izuku immediately stopped his rambling and looked at Katsuki. He opened his mouth to say something when he heard a scream from a distance. The trio stopped what they were doing and looked in the direction of where the scream came from. It didn't sound far from here, so Izuku started running towards it. He didn't know why he was running. All he knew was that his body had moved independently. He felt determined to save whoever was in trouble. "Where the hell do you think you're going, huh?" Katsuki said, running behind Izuku. Izuku opened his mouth to say something when Shoto ran alongside him and spoke calmly. "Bakugo, he's running towards the person who screamed just now. I can't explain it, but we must help whoever it is." Katsuki scoffed and rolled his eyes as they approached the scene. Their stamina was boosted when they transformed, so they could run for long periods without getting tired. A girl with short brown hair was on the floor, and a girl with blonde hair was on top of her, holding a knife to her neck. The brunette was holding the girl's wrist as she was screaming words at her. "Let me go. What do you even want from me? I have nothing." The blondie smiled widely and leaned closer to her face. "I like you, you're pretty. You must be pretty enough to be the princess that holds one for all." The brunette shook her head, and Izuku ran to the two girls. The diamonds on his hands glowed brightly as he punched the girl out of the way, sending her flying. The girl got up and giggled maniacally as she picked up her knife, which was broken in half. She looked at Izuku, Katsuki, and Shoto. "It looks like we've got company. The one who punched me is also a cutie. It looks like I'll have to come back another day. Bye-bye." The blonde opened a portal and went through it. Then, the brunette on the floor got up and cleaned herself from the dirt. She looked at Izuku and her eyes widened. Izuku's eyes also widened. "Achiko, is that you?" Izuku said, walking closer to her, and she did the same. She looked up and down at his clothes and cracked a smile. "What with the clothes?" She started laughing and Izuku frowned. He explained the situation to her, and she looked astonished. You guys don't know how to change out of it. Then that sucks. Izuku nodded sadly, and Katsuki walked to Izuku's side and gripped his shoulder. Katsuki's expression darkened as his hand got warmer and warmer. Izuku turned his head to his side, and a small explosion came out of Katsuki's hand's palm, which made him stumble back and look at his hand and then back at Izuku. Oi, what the hell? Katsuki put his hands down to his sides and looked at Izuku, who was now rolling on the floor because his shoulder had caught fire. Katsuki started laughing at Izuku, and Izuku was yelling, "Kaken! Stop laughing, please." That made him laugh even harder when Shoto ruined the fun. Ice crystallized down to his shoulder, and the fire stopped. There goes Icy Hot ruining all the fun. Katsuki scowled, and Izuku sighed in relief as Shoto helped him get up. Ichiko looked at Katsuki furiously and wanted to say something, but Izuku silenced her and told her not to say anything, or it would make him angrier. Then, a small star came floating down from the sky, and it started to speak to them. "Hello, my name is Nene. I hope we can all get along. I just want to tell you about what happened. You three are all Sailor Guardians. Your mission is to find and protect the prince or princess." Katsuki grabbed the star and squeezed it so hard that it separated into smaller stars. "I'm going to kill you, you hear me?" Nene laughed and returned to her normal shape. She got a little magic wand and sprinkled it over the three, and they were back into their casual outfits. "You are all still the same as before. Anyway, I'm here to help, give advice, and transform you back into your casual attire. Farewell." Nene disappeared, and Katsuki got a stone and threw it on the ground. He was rambling on about how stupid this is. Izuku tried to calm Katsuki down while Shoto cleaned some scrapes that Ichiko got from the blonde girl. Who was she, and what did she mean by one for all? Was it going to be an enemy they'll face in the future? Izuku's perspective a week had passed since Kaken, Shoto, and I underwent our astonishing transformation into Sailor Guardians. The excitement still buzzed in my veins, but an unsettling thought lingered. I hadn't seen Nene since that initial introduction. Sitting cross-legged on my bed, I absent-mindedly inspected the All-Might keychain hanging from my fingers, its metallic surface catching the light in a way that made it seem almost alive. My room was a shrine to All Might. Figurines dotted every surface, a testament to my admiration for the hero. But this keychain felt different. It was more than a mere trinket. I knew I had to carry it with me at all times, especially during times of crisis. With a determined breath, I pulled out my laptop and began to search for information on the Sailor Guardians. My awakening as one had ignited a thirst for knowledge about this new identity. While scrolling through various links, a headline caught my eye: The History of the Sailor Guardians. Intrigued, I clicked on it, diving into a world I barely understood. The narrative unfolded before me, with details that blurred the lines between myth and reality. The Sailor Guardians were described as formidable warriors, blessed with powers bestowed through enchanted objects like pens, brooches, and bracelets. My heart raced as I read further about the ancient kingdoms, the Moon Kingdom ruled by a graceful queen and the Earth Kingdom led by a valiant king. Their love story, a classic tale of destiny, echoed through the ages, yet I couldn't help but wonder, what did any of this have to do with Kaken, Shoto, and me? As I continued reading, the atmosphere grew heavy with tension. The Guardians were tasked with protecting the royal couple from impending dangers, but a tragic war erupted, one that severed the ties between the two kingdoms. In a moment of desperation and sorrow, a woman wielding a sword aimed for the queen, but it was the king who stood in her way. His life was extinguished in an instant. Overwhelmed by grief, the queen followed suit in a heartbreaking conclusion to their tale. Scrolling down, my eyes landed on an image of the doomed couple. The king, with radiant blonde hair and piercing red eyes, had an aura of strength, while the queen, stunning in her dark green hair and emerald eyes, held a star delicately in her hand, symbolizing her celestial power. I closed my laptop, my thoughts a whirlwind as I pondered the fates of forgotten royals. Would they even resemble their guardians? Were their identities interchanged? Did they roam the halls of our school, hidden in plain sight? Lost in contemplation, a sharp knock on my door broke the spell. My mother, 𝗵𝗄, peeked in, concern etched on her face. "Honey, is everything all right? I called you several times for dinner, but you never came down," she said, her voice filled with a blend of worry and warmth. I scrambled to my feet, leaving the keychain on my desk. "Everything's all right, Mom. I was just deep in thought about something. I'll be down in a minute. Just let me wash up first," I assured her, offering a faint smile. She nodded and returned a gentle smile of her own before shutting the door, her footsteps fading into the distance. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, but as I turned around, my face collided with something small and sharp. Startled, I stumbled back, eyes wide as I focused on the shimmering figure floating before me. Relief flooded my system when I recognized Nene. But before I could voice a greeting, she lifted her magic wand with urgency, and the all-might keychain floated effortlessly into the air above me. "Someone needs your help. Transform and I'll show you the way. Quickly. We have no time to waste," she exclaimed, her tone leaving no room for questions. Gulping at the gravity of her words, I took a deep breath and clutched the keychain against my chest. "Sunlight Prism Power Makeup," I shouted, though my voice wavered slightly, still unsure of the magic that encapsulated me. In an instant, my transformation enveloped me, the fabric of my frilly, breathable costume shimmering into existence around me. I hastily grabbed a piece of paper and scribbled a note for my mom, apologizing for my sudden departure and assuring her I'd be back soon. With a final glance at my room, I followed Nene as she floated out of the window. My heart raced as I hesitated for just a moment before leaping after her, landing softly on the ground below, relieved that the jump hadn't resulted in any pain. As I sprinted down the street, the diamond on my hand began to pulse with energy, urging me to go faster. I felt a surge of power coursing through me. Our destination materialized in my sights, a jewelry shop with its doors invitingly ajar. "Is anyone here? I've come to save you," I called out, my voice echoing against the stillness of the night, ready to confront whatever awaited inside. As I stepped cautiously inside, the air felt thick with tension, and my voice trembled as I uttered, "What is going on here?" The moment my foot landed on a hidden ring embedded in the floor, a deafening crack reverberated through the room. Time seemed to freeze for a heartbeat as the sound echoed off the walls, sending chills down my spine. Suddenly, I noticed footsteps emerging from the dense shadows, and as the figure came into the pale light of the moon filtering through the window, horror gripped my heart. It was Momo Yaoyorozu from my class, her usually vibrant demeanor now dulled as she dangled limply, being dragged by the collar of her uniform. The sight of her unconscious form sent a wave of panic coursing through me. But what truly sent a shiver down my spine was the figure dragging her, someone who bore an unsettling resemblance to Momo. This doppelganger had sharp, jagged teeth that glinted menacingly in the moonlight, and her eyes glowed a sickly shade of light yellow. With a sinister smirk curling on her lips, she turned to face me. "It's you. That boy from yesterday. I'm surprised you found me so quickly. You just couldn't wait to see me, huh?" Her taunting voice dripped with malice, each word sending a fresh wave of dread washing over me. She smiled widely and threw Momo to the ground. I felt furious at the sight of his classmate being thrown onto the ground, but his body just wouldn't move. The girl looked around the shop and broke some diamond rings, smiling while doing that. "What on earth are you doing, shattering valuable objects like these?" I exclaimed in a trembling voice, my heart racing and my legs quaking beneath me. The sheer weight of the moment was almost too much to bear. I felt utterly exposed in this chaotic scene, overwhelmed by a sense of dread. I couldn't face this alone. The fear gripped me tightly, urging me to call for one of the other sailor guardians to come to my aid. As my wide eyes searched for an escape, the girl before me turned, her expression shifting into something almost sinister. A sly smirk crept across her face, revealing a glint of mischief that sent a chill down my spine. That look told me she thrived in this chaos, her intent anything but friendly. "I'm looking for something valuable. If it doesn't break, then the 𝐒𝐵 will be pleased with me and reward me with gallons of BLD." She licked her sword and sighed happily at the thought of tasting BLD. I just looked at her in shock when suddenly a person came running in. "The hell you think you're doing, Deku?" You should be beating her but right now. A familiar, gravelly voice rumbled from behind him, sending a shiver of recognition down his spine. When the calloused hand rested on his shoulder, a wave of courage and strength surged through him, filling every fiber of his being. I let out a long, relieved sigh, feeling a weight lift off my chest. Turning slightly, determination etched itself onto my face, clear and resolute as I prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I nodded and raised my voice. I am the pretty guardian who fights for love and for justice. I am Sailor Deku. In the name of the Almighty, I'll punish you. Katsuki's eyebrow arched skeptically, his expression darkening as a frown settled across his face. I caught the subtle shift in his demeanor but chose to remain silent. My gaze returned to the girl in front of us, who stood poised in a fierce fighting stance, her muscles tense and ready for action. The air around her crackled with anticipation, a palpable energy that filled the space between us. So you're a sailor guardian? Sailor Deku. That's cute. The girl said, spinning around, holding her knife close to her chest when suddenly Katsuki spoke up. Evil extras be gone. In the name of the Almighty, I'll blast your head off. And I be called Sailor Dynamite. Katsuki placed one hand on his hip, his posture radiating confidence as a triumphant grin spread across his face. His eyes sparkled with mischief as he turned to look at me, the intensity of his gaze making it hard to look away. It was clear he was pleased with himself, and the air around him buzzed with a sense of pride. Do it, Sailor Deku. I nodded, determination flooding my veins as I raised my fist into the air. My diamond began to glow with an intense brilliance, illuminating the path ahead as I charged toward the girl. A fierce resolve surged within me. I was going to reach her, and I was certain my fist would connect squarely with her face. But just as I closed the distance, a swirling portal emerged, enveloping her in a flash of light. I stumbled forward, my momentum carrying me into the unforgiving wall. A jolt of pain echoed through my hand as I instinctively clutched it, groaning softly. Kaken approached, his presence commanding as he knelt beside me. He placed his hand gently over mine, and in that moment, a vision washed over me, a stunning white kingdom, resplendent and ethereal, filled with shimmering spires and vibrant skies. But as quickly as it had come, the vision faded when Kaken withdrew his touch, and I stepped back, confusion swirling in my mind. What just happened? I wondered aloud, the image lingering like a dream just out of reach. It was breathtaking, almost surreal, and I couldn't shake the warmth that blossomed in my chest, a feeling I struggled to name yet, but it comforted me amid the ache. I glanced over at Kaken, who was staring at his hand with wide, incredulous eyes, as if the very act of moving it was beyond his comprehension. His expression was a mixture of shock and confusion, clearly reflecting that he wasn't quite sure what had just transpired either. I slowly pushed myself up from the ground, shaking off the remnants of dirt and grass that clung to my clothes after our recent ordeal. Just then, Nene floated in through the expansive doorway, her presence illuminating the room with a soft, ethereal glow. With a graceful flick of her delicate wand, a shimmering wave of energy enveloped us, and in an instant, we found ourselves back in our casual attire. It was as if the stress of the moment had been swept away along with the remnants of our adventure. Nene then vanished as mysteriously as she had appeared, leaving a silence that felt heavy with unanswered questions. As I contemplated the bizarre event, I couldn't help but voice my thoughts aloud. What was that place? I mused, still trying to process everything. It looked like a castle, but not just any castle. I swear I've seen it before, or at least felt its presence in my dreams. Yet I know I've never actually been there. My mind raced as vague memories surfaced, tinged with a sense of nostalgia that I couldn't quite grasp. Then suddenly I felt a warm hand hit my head and I rubbed the back of my head. You're rambling again. Stop it, it's annoying as hell. Kaken's voice cut through the air, sharp and unmistakable. I felt a rush of heat rise to my cheeks as I quickly mumbled an apology, my words tumbling out in a flurry. As we stepped out of the jewelry shop, the rich scent of polished wood and glittering gems still fresh in the air, relief washed over me. Thank goodness my house was only a few blocks away, but I couldn't shake the urge to ask 𝐭𝐽𝐻 something that had been nagging at my mind. 𝐭𝐽𝐻, how did you know I needed help? I ventured, curiosity laced throughout my voice. As I turned to look at him, I tilted my head slightly, taking in the way he shoved his hands deep into his pockets, shoulders squared and confidence radiating from him. The moon hung high above us, casting a silver glow down the quiet street, illuminating everything in a celestial light. It felt surreal, as if time had paused just for us. The moon, he replied, gaze fixed on the luminous orb above. It showed me you were in trouble, and my body moved on its own. I just knew you needed me. I turned my gaze upward to the moon, its brilliance mesmerizing, then shifted my attention back to the ground. I watched our feet fall in sync with one another, the rhythm of our steps echoing in the stillness of the night. An unsettling sense of déjà vu washed over me, a feeling that I had walked this path before, experienced this very moment. The weight of the keychain dangling from my pocket seemed almost heavy, as if it held secrets that were driving me to the brink of madness. With each step, the sensation intensified, pulling at my thoughts, intertwining them with memories that felt just out of reach. I felt the gentle brush of our fingers as they grazed against each other, a fleeting connection that sent a rush of warmth through me. After that brief moment, I sensed him shift slightly, creating a bit of distance between us. We continued walking in silence, the air heavy with unspoken words, until we finally arrived at my house. "Good night, 𝐭𝐽𝐻," I called out cheerfully, my voice tinged with a hint of hopefulness. He simply replied nonchalantly, "Sure," before turning away and heading off into the dimming twilight. As I stepped into the cozy familiarity of my home, I was greeted by the rhythmic clatter of dishes from the kitchen. My mom's head popped up from behind the dishwasher, her expression morphing from focus to sheer relief as she rushed toward me. With an urgency that only a worried mother could muster, she cupped my cheeks in her warm hands, scanning my face as if expecting to find cuts or bruises. "Honey, you can't just leave me a note and wander off." I was worried sick. An hour had passed, and I thought something terrible had happened to you. Are you hungry? I can heat up the delicious food I made earlier. I gently took her wrists and lowered her hands to her sides, offering a reassuring smile. "I'm okay, Mom," I said softly, watching as her expression began to soften with relief. She guided me into the kitchen, the familiar scent of home-cooked meals enveloping us like a warm embrace. I settled into my usual spot at the dinner table, my mind still lingering on the unspoken moments I had shared with 𝐭𝐽𝐻, while I waited for the comforting sounds of food warming up in the microwave. She carefully placed the vibrant platter of food on the table, the rich aromas wafting through the air, before making her way to the living room. I wasted no time, diving into the meal, my hunger overpowering any lingering thoughts. After savoring the last bite, I trudged upstairs, feeling the weight of fatigue pressing down on me. All that energy spent on a single punch, one that had completely missed its target, left me drained. I flopped down onto my bed, the soft sheets welcoming me as I pulled out my phone to check for any notifications. As I scrolled through the screen, my eyelids grew heavier with each passing moment, and, unable to resist any longer, I closed my eyes, succumbing to the pull of sleep. Third-person perspective, Prince Lucian. In the depths of his dream, Izuku found himself in a bustling, chaotic place. Among the throngs of people he spotted a boy with vibrant, spiky blonde hair. He stood out like a beacon in the crowd, his expression a mixture of determination and urgency. Clutching a girl's hand, he guided her with a firm grip, her eyes wide with fear. The girl, her features pale and eyes darting around, seemed panicked as they navigated through the dense crowd. The boy held a gleaming sword at his side, its blade catching the light and reflecting glimmers of hope amidst the chaos. As they dashed forward, Izuku could feel the palpable tension in the air, the cries of the crowd blending into a distant roar, heightening the urgency of their escape. In the quiet depths of night, as a gentle moonlight filtered through his window, Katsuki found himself lost in a vivid dream. He sensed a presence above him, a girl gliding gracefully through the air, descending like a feather from the heavens. Her long, flowing white dress billowed around her, catching the light and shimmering as if woven from starlight. Delicate earrings hung from her ears, reflecting glimmers of silver that danced like tiny constellations. As she neared, Katsuki could see the serene expression on her face, her deep eyes sparkling with an ethereal light. There was something regal about her, a poise that combined elegance and strength. "Princess Aurelius," he breathed, recognition striking him like lightning. The moment his hand brushed against hers, the dream unraveled like a fragile thread, and a sudden rush of energy jolted him awake. Simultaneously, in a whole different, Izuku shot up in his bed, his heart racing. The echoes of their shared, extraordinary visions resonated in the silence of the night, leaving them both panting, wide-eyed, and inexplicably connected, leaving them in thought of the dreams they both had. Katsuki's perspective. I jolted awake in my bed, my heart racing as I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to steady my breath. The remnants of the dream clung to my mind like a vivid painting. In that surreal moment, a girl with cascading green hair, shimmering like emeralds under the sunlight, extended her delicate hand toward him. Her eyes sparkled with an affectionate familiarity that seemed to transcend the boundaries of reality. He looked at her with a mix of surprise and recognition, uttering her name with a tone that suggested they shared a deep connection. The intensity of that moment lingered, making it hard to shake off the feeling of longing and curiosity that now filled the space around me. As I turned my gaze to the clock, the bright red numbers glaring at me, I realized it was already 5 o'clock in the morning. I had intended to wake up at 6 o'clock, giving myself just enough time to prepare for school, but the thought of that enchanting green-haired princess lingered in my mind, making it impossible to drift back into a peaceful slumber. With a resigned sigh, I decided it was better to start getting ready now rather than risk losing myself in dreams. I slipped into my crisp school uniform, the fabric cool against my skin, and headed down the winding staircase. Each step echoed quietly in the stillness of the early morning. As I reached the bottom, the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped me. My mom was already awake, seated at the kitchen table, her fingers wrapped around a steaming mug. It was now 5:30 a.m. Grabbing a slice of toast, I quickly spread a generous layer of butter across its warm surface before taking a hearty bite. The buttery flavor filled my mouth, momentarily distracting me from my swirling thoughts. Just then, my mom set her coffee mug down and turned to me, a worried expression etched on her face. "Honey, you're up earlier than usual. Did something happen?" she asked, her voice laced with concern as she searched my eyes for an answer. I met her gaze and couldn't help but scoff, biting back the urge to explain. It seemed clear to me that she had already decided to hold back her questions, so I shrugged it off and returned to my toast, feeling a mix of frustration and confusion for her concern. I struggled to grasp the nuances of people's emotions unless they laid everything out for me in plain terms, which often left me feeling adrift in a sea of confusion. As I glanced at the clock and saw it was 6:30, I decided it was time to leave the house. I stepped outside, the familiar weight of my All Might keychain swinging from my backpack, a little piece of motivation that made me feel invincible. After all, I might need it in case of an emergency, or simply for the thrill of transforming and tapping into my powers for a bit of fun. The sun hung high in the sky, its rays warming my skin in a gentle embrace that felt reassuring, almost like a comforting hug from a loved one. I chuckled to myself, aware of how cheesy it sounded to think of the sun in such a sentimental way. But ever since I had discovered these extraordinary abilities, a strange sense of nostalgia clung to me, reminiscent of long-forgotten memories or fleeting dreams. It was an odd sensation, one I couldn't quite articulate, but I brushed it aside as unimportant and focused on my journey. As I approached 𝗓𝗪, my eyes caught sight of Icy Hot and Deku walking side by side, engaged in a conversation shared by friends or perhaps rivals. A surge of frustration bubbled up inside me. Without overthinking it, I quickened my pace and made my way towards them. In an impulsive moment, I inserted myself right between them, deliberately bumping my shoulder against Icy Hot's, asserting my presence as I tried to mask the tumult of emotions swirling within me. "Kaken, you can't do that to Shoto." Deku's voice cut through the air, filled with concern as he rushed over, his eyes wide with worry. I shot him a glare, the corners of my mouth curling into a defiant smirk. "I can do whatever I want," I replied, my tone dripping with arrogance. It was the kind of challenge I relished, and I could see the protest brewing in Deku's eyes, but I wasn't in the mood for a debate. The sharp clang of the bell echoed throughout the hallway, a stark reminder that class was about to begin. I rolled my eyes, irritation bubbling beneath the surface. I quickened my pace, eager to escape the crowd and the chatter that buzzed around me like an endless swarm of flies. As I pushed open the door to the classroom, a rush of noise greeted me, laughter and conversation intertwining in a chaotic symphony. I spotted a seat at the back, far away from the clamor, and made my way over. As I settled into my desk, a few friends waved excitedly, their smiles bright and welcoming. But I wasn't in the mood for camaraderie. I simply waved them off, the weariness of the day pressing down on me like a heavy weight. I needed a moment of solitude, a chance to gather my thoughts and shut out the world, even if just for a little while. IIT felt as though a giant red X had been painted on everyone's faces, marking them as outcasts, with only Deku, 𝗓𝗓𝗏, and Kirishima who stood out. Shoto's perspective, I stood beside Midoriya, who was visibly shaken as he recounted a dream he had experienced the previous night. His voice trembled slightly, revealing the depth of his emotions. He described how vivid the dream was, painting such an intense picture that it brought him to tears upon waking. He admitted that he felt so overwhelmed that he couldn't manage to drift back to sleep afterwards. "Midoriya, are you feeling okay now?" I asked, concern etched into my features. Even though it was merely a dream, I understood how haunting nightmares could be, lingering long after one had woken up. "I'm fine now," he replied, though a faint trace of worry still danced in his eyes. "But yesterday I was doing some research on the Sailor Guardians, and I came across a picture of the king and queen. In my dream, the king was pulling someone. I can't quite shake that image." I nodded, letting the information wash over me as I pondered its significance. Just as I was about to respond with my thoughts, Midoriya suddenly bolted from the classroom, his keychain clutched tightly in his hand. Without hesitation, I dashed after him. "Midoriya, where are you going?" I shouted, my voice echoing down the empty hallway. He turned back, his expression filled with urgency. "Someone's in trouble not far from here." Panic laced his words, and I felt a surge of adrenaline at the thought of someone in need. I matched his pace, my heart racing, just moments later when Bakugo joined us, his usual fiery determination evident. "We're all fighting together, you got that?" Bakugo exclaimed, squeezing his keychain with fervor. In an instant, he transformed into his battle costume, the familiar explosive energy radiating from him like a live wire. I followed suit, my own transformation igniting a sense of purpose within me. As we arrived at the scene, my eyes widened in disbelief. A colossal dinosaur loomed before us, wreaking havoc among the frightened citizens. The sheer size of the creature was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. This was unlike anything I had encountered before. I took a deep breath to steady my nerves, plastering a nonchalant expression on my face despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. With a determined focus, I felt the familiar warmth of my diamond on my forehead begin to glow brightly. In moments, icy energy surged from my outstretched hand, sending a flurry of ice shards flying toward the rampaging dinosaur. Meanwhile, Midoriya was diligently working to evacuate the panicked crowd, his efforts earnest as he guided people to safety. I could see him dodging debris and shouting reassurances. On the other side, Bakugo unleashed a series of explosive blasts from his palms, each detonation ringing like thunder, drawing the beast's attention away from the fleeing citizens. The scene was chaotic, but amidst the tumult, I felt a sense of camaraderie with my friends, ready to face whatever came next together. Izuku's perspective eye dashed to clear civilians from the dinosaur's rampaging path, adrenaline racing through my veins. Just as the colossal creature bore down on me, Kaken swooped in like a comet, snatching me from the brink of disaster. "I've got you, Sailor Deku. Watch your back next time, nerd." Kaken exclaimed as he set me down safely on the ground. My heart raced as I saw Shoto spring into action, freezing the dinosaur in its tracks. I exchanged a determined nod with 𝐭𝐻𝐿. Now's your moment, sailor. Dynamite. In an instant, 𝐭𝐻𝐿 rocketed into the sky, his explosions propelling him higher and higher. Eat this. Moon impact. He bellowed, unleashing a thunderous explosion that echoed through the air. The dinosaur disintegrated into a glistening gray goop, and 𝐭𝐻𝐿's diamonds sparkled against the morning sky, glowing luminously like mini moons. I stood there, awestruck, as the spectacle unfolded before my very eyes. Shoto and 𝐭𝐻𝐿 both came down next to me and we fist-bumped each other. 𝐭𝐻𝐿 beamed with pride, his voice booming over the crowd. How's that for you, you overgrown lizard? His words were directed at the enormous creature they had just defeated, a grin plastered across his face as he reveled in their victory. Just as he finished, a throng of enthusiastic onlookers surged around them, their cheers filling the air and drowning out his triumphant tone. Thank you so much. We would have been goners without you. A few voices shouted excitedly, their eyes filled with admiration. I offered a shy wave to the crowd, feeling a bit overwhelmed by the sudden attention, while Shoto stood beside me, animatedly discussing something with 𝐭𝐻𝐿. Good job, Sailor Dynamite, Shoto said, a broad smile lighting up his face, clearly pleased with our teamwork and the outcome of the battle. 𝐭𝐻𝐿, however, wasn't one for sentimentality. He quickly cut in with a snappy retort, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. Shut up, icy hot, he grumbled, the competitive spark still alive in his eyes, as he tried to brush off the compliments despite the pride swelling in his chest. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement, the energy of their victory palpable in the air. A few days had passed since our last encounter, during which we faced a few enemies and managed to defeat them without much difficulty. One afternoon, I found myself organizing a stack of books for a teacher in the corner of the classroom. As I arranged them neatly on the shelf, I overheard Kirishima animatedly chatting with Denki nearby. Did you see Sailor Dynamite? That guy definitely has an explosive personality, kind of like someone we know, Denki remarked, his eyes glued to a video on his phone. Kirishima nodded enthusiastically in response. Right. And look at Sailor Shoto, he's completely unfazed by Dynamite's insults. Now that's what I call manly. Kirishima exclaimed, excitement practically radiating from him as he leaned closer to Denki, putting his hands on Denki's shoulders to get a better look at the screen. Denki furrowed his brow in concentration, watching the video intently. "Aw man, this is so cool. I'm totally stumped. I want powers like that too. I bet if I had those abilities, I could take down all those guys in a heartbeat," he added, his eyes gleaming with a mix of admiration and envy at the thought of wielding such strength. I had been observing the two friends for a few moments, their laughter and enthusiasm infectious, when I finally decided to chime in. "Hey, what are you guys talking about?" I set the pile of books down and approached them, curiosity piqued. Kirishima turned to me, a bright smile lighting up his face. "Oh, you didn't know. The Sailor Guardians are the talk of the town right now. They're these incredible guardians with badass powers. We're actually watching them right now." Intrigued, I leaned over to peer at the video they were engrossed in. On the screen, 𝐭𝐻𝐿, Shoto, and I were battling a fearsome dinosaur we had encountered just a few days earlier. The action was intense, showcasing all of our powers in full force. "Sailor 𝐴," I began, but Kirishima interrupted me, excitement bubbling over. "Just look at this. I bet they don't even go to school," he said, laughing, obviously caught up in the fantasy of being a hero. Denki, surprisingly earnest, countered, "That can't be true. Is it that hard to believe I want to blast things too?" His voice was muffled as he rested his forehead on the desk, frustration lingering in the air. Kirishima chuckled at Denki's response, leaning down to give him a reassuring pat on the back. "You just don't want to do your homework, do you?" Kirishima teased lightly, and Denki nodded, the initial frustration melting away into a reluctant acceptance of the reality. The camaraderie between them, sparked by the vibrant world of the Sailor Guardians, filled the room with an energy that was hard to ignore, as I couldn't help but smile at their boundless enthusiasm and friendship. Come on. I take school very seriously," Denki exclaimed, frustration evident in his voice as he pushed himself up from the desk. He turned to face Kirishima, annoyance etched on his features. Don't pretend you don't want superpowers either, you never stop raving about Red Riot. Kirishima couldn't help but smirk, his confidence radiating. He's a manly superhero, and might I remind you that you also bombed your last exam. His playful jab was enough to elicit a glare from Denki. Hey, that's a low blow. Denki retorted, his cheeks instinctively flushing with embarrassment. I totally studied. Right, Midoriya? Midoriya. Denki's voice trailed off as he glanced at me, only to find me lost in thought. My mind had wandered off after they mentioned the Sailor Guardians, and it wasn't until Kirishima suddenly shouted my name that I snapped back to reality. Ah! I nearly jumped out of my seat, the sudden sound jolting me. Both Denki and Kirishima stared at me, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern, tilting their heads in perfect synchrony. You good man? You've been spacing out a lot lately, Denki asked, leaning forward as if trying to read my mind. Before Denki could rise to check on me, I waved my hands dismissively. I'm fine. Just a little behind on sleep, that's all. What were we talking about? Red Riot. Oh right, I remember him transforming in the comics. It was honestly really cool. A soft sigh escaped my lips as I recalled those vibrant panels filled with action. Just as I was about to get lost in my thoughts again, Denki opened his mouth once more, his expression thoughtful. If you say so. Speaking of transformations, I wonder if the Sailor Guardians transform too. I bet it's all magical and sparkly, he mused, placing his finger thoughtfully against his lips. His comment triggered a flood of memories, and I found myself speaking almost to myself, my voice trailing off. Yeah, magical, very magical, and sparkly too, couldn't see. I chuckled quietly at the chaotic rush of emotions that swept over me as I remembered my own transformation experience, a mix of wonder and confusion. Denki and Kirishima exchanged worried glances upon hearing my subdued murmurs, a frown tugging at Kirishima's lips as he leaned closer to Denki. Do you think he's okay? He whispered, a genuine concern lacing his words. Denki shook his head slowly, unsure of what to make of my distracted state. The camaraderie between us felt palpable, the worry for each other lingering in the air as we navigated this chaotic world together. Katsuki's perspective, I can't shake the feeling of the dream that's been haunting me. It's the same vivid scene playing over and over in my mind, each night more intense than the last. I feel an overwhelming urge to find this princess from my dreams because the constant repetition is driving me to the brink of insanity. I've been snapping at people around me lately, my patience wearing thin. It's clear that I haven't been sleeping well, and I've noticed that Deku hasn't been his usual energetic self. Either. Deku, it's uncanny how much he resembles the girl in my dream. You could say it's the hair, that exact shade of lush, green fluff that's almost impossible to ignore. But there's one key difference. Deku is definitely not a girl. So why can't I stop thinking about him? It feels confusing and frustrating. I catch myself pondering over him more often than I'd like to admit. This irritating nerd, with his endearing yet exasperating tendencies, his big, expressive green eyes, his wild fluffy hair that sticks out in every direction, and his relentless drive to push himself to excel in everything he does. As I lay back on my bed, the thoughts swirl around in my mind, ultimately lulling me into a restless sleep. This time, however, my dream took a new turn. I found myself on a sunlit beach where a boy with strikingly blonde spiky hair, dressed impeccably in a crisp white tuxedo, was walking hand in hand with a girl who mirrored the green of a deep forest with her long, flowing hair. She was a vision in a stunning yellow dress that seemed to dance in the gentle breeze. The way the blonde boy looked at her was nothing short of enchanting. His gaze was filled with a profound adoration as he pulled her closer. Suddenly, he stopped, leaned in, and pressed his lips softly against hers. The girl whispered softly, "I love you, Lucian." Her voice was gentle, and her large green eyes sparkled with an undeniable warmth. The scene was so touching and vivid that I could almost feel the tide pulling in rhythm with their emotions. Just as the moment reached its peak, the shrill sound of my alarm jolted me awake, shattering the dream. Surprisingly, I had actually managed to sleep well last night, which was a small victory amidst the chaos in my mind. How long would these dreams persist, and what would they mean for me? I slowly rolled out of bed, stretching my arms overhead as a heavy yawn escaped my lips. The morning light filtered through my curtains, casting a warm glow in my room, which made it tempting to crawl back under the covers. Reluctantly, I shuffled across the floor and reached for my school uniform hanging neatly by the door. I was relieved it was Friday. The prospect of sleeping in on Saturday felt like a small reward after a long week of classes. Despite my excitement for the weekend, a nagging feeling tugged at me, hinting that my quiet Saturday would be interrupted by something significant. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it felt meaningful enough to linger in my thoughts. As I made my way through the day, everything unfolded in the usual rhythm of school life. The bell rang, classes came and went, and laughter echoed in the hallways. Yet, today felt different. I noticed how much I avoided talking to Deku. It pained me to realize how little I engaged with him. When I spotted him walking down the corridor with Icy Hot, their banter filling the air, I felt a strange and uncomfortable tug in my chest. Instead of joining them as I normally would, I hesitated, choosing to stay safely at a distance. The usual joy I found in poking fun at Deku's relentless chattiness was absent today. I wanted to shout out to him, teasing him to stop his endless rambling, just like I always did, but the words seemed to stick in my throat. An unexplainable awkwardness clouded my thoughts, leaving me feeling isolated even in a bustling crowd of students. Not today, I thought to myself, as I turned my gaze away and continued down the hall, lost in my own swirling emotions. Then, just like that, the weekend was upon me and it was Saturday afternoon. The clock read 2 p.m. when an unexpected sensation, a gentle but persistent poke on my forehead, broke my concentration. Looking up, I recognized the source, that infuriating little star, the celestial entity that gifted me with these unpredictable powers. With a flick of my wrist, I snatched the star from the air and, perhaps too forcefully, flung it across my room. To my annoyance, it merely floated back to me, undeterred by my actions. "Hello, Sailor Dynamite," the star chimed, its voice bright but filled with urgency. "I've already visited everyone else's homes to relay this information, but tonight, you will attend a ball. Sailor Deku suspects that the crystal our enemies are after will appear there." Nene, the star, gazed down at me, her luminous form shimmering with mischief and seriousness. As I absorbed her words, a slow burn of frustration welled within me. I took a deep breath to steady my racing thoughts, fully aware that this situation merited my full attention. "What crystal are you talking about? You haven't been telling us SHT. All you've told us to do is find the prince or princess, whoever they are, and then you disappeared back to your starry homeland as if this were all just a game." My arms crossed defiantly as I raised an eyebrow, expecting some explanation. In response to my challenge, Nene waved her wand with a flourish, and a shimmering projection burst onto the wall beside us. I watched in awe as the image materialized, illuminating the room with an ethereal glow. "Right now, we are searching for a unique diamond crystal known as One for All," she explained, her tone grave. "Only the prince or princess can wield this kind of power, and our enemies wish to exploit it for their nefarious purposes." As the projection resolved, a striking image of a white diamond-shaped crystal emerged. It resembled something that might adorn an exquisite engagement ring, yet an unmistakable energy emanated, a raw, intense power that sent a shiver down my spine. I could understand, at least in part, why so many would covet the chance to possess something so potent. My mind raced with thoughts of the impending ball, the danger lurking in the shadows, and the heavy responsibility that rested on my shoulders. Nene gently placed a small, vibrant orange pen into my palm, its surface adorned with a quirky, boom, sticker that seemed to pop with energy. "When the moment arrives, remember to hold hands with one another," she instructed, her voice brimming with importance. "Together, say, 'Disguise power transform me,' and then fill in the last part with whatever you longing." I examined the pen skeptically, its cheerful colors starkly contrasting my mood. With a dismissive scoff, I shoved it into my pocket, the sensation of its smooth surface lingering against my fingers. Nene offered a final wave, her presence fading into thin air as she vanished from sight, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I received a call from Deku, but in a moment of frustration, I swiftly clicked the big red X on my screen. The thought of talking to him right now was unbearable. In fact, I didn't want to converse with anyone. I craved solitude, a blissful silence where I could gather my thoughts without interruption. But after a while, the silence began to feel oppressive and a little dull. To drown out the quiet, I slipped on my earbuds and tuned into a gripping TV show, losing myself in its plot until it was time for the ball. As the hour approached, I sent a text to both Deku and 𝗓𝗓𝗏, instructing them to meet me at a specific secluded location. I assured them that I already had the attire we needed for the evening's festivities. The spot I had chosen was tucked away, a hidden gem where the usual crowd never ventured, a perfect place to transform without arousing any suspicion. When I arrived at the meeting point, I stood still, scanning the area as I waited for my friends. A few minutes passed before I saw them approaching together. My heart quickened and a flash of irritation surged through me at the sight of them side by side. I quickly pushed that anger down, reminding myself of the mission at hand. Once they joined me, I wasted no time in explaining the transformation process. Deku took my hand in his warm grip, and 𝗓𝗓𝗏 latched onto Deku's hand, creating a symbolic chain. I pulled out the transformation pen, holding it high as we all leaned in closer. With a shared determination, we shouted in unison, "Disguise power transform us as 𝗓𝗏𝗏 Prince." In an instant, we felt the familiar surge of energy coursing through us, and with a flash of magical light, our casual clothes morphed into stunning tuxedos. Mine was sleek and black, exuding sophistication. Deku's was a rich dark green that complemented his bright personality, and 𝗓𝗓𝗏's tuxedo was a striking navy blue, matching his cool demeanor perfectly. I tucked the transformation pen into my pocket, hoping it wouldn't accidentally fall out during the night. As we began striding toward the ball, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety bubbling within me. Reaching into my pocket, I touched the 𝐒𝐻𝐼𝐺 keychain I had hidden there, a small token of comfort. I couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of it dangling outside my tuxedo at such a formal event. It would be ridiculous. Suddenly, 𝗓𝗓𝗏 broke the silence with a question that made my blood boil. "Bakugo, why did you say prince? You could have just said formal attire." I shot him an incredulous glance, a surge of irritation welling up inside me. The concept of princes, princesses, kings, and queens had been swirling in my mind nonstop, and in a moment of slip, I had blurted out the word, prince. I clenched my fists, resisting the urge to punch him for his comment but knowing I had to keep my cool. Tonight was about finding the diamond, after all, even if my pride felt slightly bruised. How many times have I told you to shut the F up, 𝗓𝗓𝗏? I'm sure you wouldn't want my fist hitting your face. I shot him a furious glare, my fists clenched at my sides as I threatened to punch him. He merely shrugged, the indifference on his face only infuriating me more. I rolled my eyes in exasperation, but as I did, I caught sight of Deku gazing up at the moon. His expression was distant, almost wistful as if he were yearning for something far beyond our reach. Shaking my head, I turned my attention back to the path ahead. The air was thick with an uneasy silence as we walked, each of us lost in our thoughts, the soft crunch of gravel beneath our feet the only sound breaking the quiet. Finally, we arrived at the grand entrance of the ball, the towering doors looming before us. A sense of anticipation filled the air, but it quickly dissipated when we learned we needed an invitation to get inside. Just then, a smug grin spread across Deku's face as he produced a set of fake tickets, the cleverness of his antics cutting through the tension like a knife. I couldn't help but roll my eyes again, though a small part of me admired his quick thinking. Izuku's perspective eye caught Kaken's gaze across the crowded ballroom, and to my surprise, he wore a rare smile. It felt almost surreal, considering I hardly ever saw him express anything but annoyance or anger. My cheeks warmed at the unexpected sight, and I quickly shook my head, trying to dispel the warmth spreading through me. With a deep breath, I steeled myself and stepped into the ballroom. The atmosphere was alive with the sounds of laughter and music, couples twirling gracefully on the dance floor, their movements fluid and carefree. Despite the festive ambience, I felt an inexplicable pull towards the dancers, my feet inching closer to join them when Shoto suddenly grasped my wrist. "Midoriya, we have a mission to do right now," he reminded me, his tone serious. I turned to meet his gaze, the weight of his words sinking in, then glanced back at the ballroom with a resigned sigh. "I understand," I replied softly, a hint of reluctance in my voice. With Kaken and Shoto by my side, we navigated through the throng of people until we came upon a door marked, "Do not enter." Without hesitation, Kaken kicked it down with a force that echoed through the hallway. I nearly squealed in surprise, but the sight that met us silenced my reaction entirely. An unconscious woman lay sprawled on the floor, and nearby stood a girl who looked to be no older than us. She clutched a locked box, her eyes widening as she spotted us. In a swift motion, she pulled out a small wand and a thick, dark purple smoke began to billow from its tip. Panic surged through me and instinctively, I reached for my all-might keychain, clutching it tightly to my chest. "Transform and run out to the balcony," I shouted, adrenaline pumping through my veins as I prepared for whatever chaos was about to unfold. I yelled out as the energy surged through me, transforming into my glittering costume in a flash of bright colors and shimmering fabric. Kaken and Shoto quickly followed suit, their own transformations radiating strength and determination. Together, we dashed outside, adrenaline pumping in our veins. As we ran, I noticed a horrifying sight. People collapsing to the ground as the thick purple smoke enveloped them, their faces contorting in fear and confusion. Anger bubbled up within me, and I took a deep breath, ready to channel that fury into action. But before I could act, the girl I had seen earlier lunged at me, catching me off guard. With a swift motion, she pushed me off the balcony. For a moment, time seemed to slow as I plummeted, a sense of dread filling my mind. I thought this was the end. Just then, I felt a firm grip on my hand. Kaken had leaped after me, his strength anchoring me as he clung desperately to the edge of the balcony. I could see his fingers slipping, and in that terrifying instant, something echoed in our minds, a shared realization of our precarious situation. "The pen!" I shouted, my voice a mixture of panic and hope. Kaken instinctively reached into his pocket, pulling out a pen that shimmered in the fading light. In a split second, it transformed into a sturdy umbrella, and we began to glide down toward the ground, the rush of air whipping around us. Kaken held me tightly around the waist, his body cool against mine, like the surface of the moon. It was as if my touch radiated warmth, grounding him in this chaotic moment. When our feet finally touched the ground, the umbrella vanished into thin air. Kaken held me close for a few lingering seconds, our eyes locking in a silent exchange filled with unspoken words. Just then, the sound of cracking ice shattered the moment, and he let go, stepping back. I turned to see Shoto, who had already pierced the girl with his ice, rendering her motionless. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Before I could fully grasp the situation, a sharp pain sliced across my cheek as a knife grazed my skin, sending a trickle of blood down my face. I spun around to see the same girl who had towered over Ochako earlier, her expression twisted with glee. "Looks like I missed, but I'll be taking that crystal now," she taunted, her eyes glinting with malice as she jumped onto the balcony. In a flash, my body reacted on instinct. I sprinted like a lightning bolt and delivered a powerful punch straight to her face. For the first time, I had landed a hit. But the effort drained me and pain shot through my fist. The girl staggered back, a wicked smile spreading across her face as blood dripped from her nose. "Before I go, my name is Himiko Toga. Nice to finally meet you, Sailor Deku," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm as a swirling portal enveloped her, pulling her away. With her disappearance, the purple smoke dissipated, leaving the room eerily quiet. Exhausted, I stumbled toward a soft couch nearby, sinking into its plush embrace. Shoto and Kaken had already de-transformed, their costumes fading back into ordinary clothing, but I remained in my form, too fatigued to change back. I watched as Shoto moved inside to help those who had fallen, checking to see if they were okay. My eyelids grew heavy, and as I swayed to the left, my head found the softness of the couch. Before I knew it, I had completely succumbed to sleep, drifting off into a world of darkness and dreams, the events of the night fading into the background. Katsuki's perspective, I made my way back up to the balcony, the chaotic scene below slowly settling into a calmer rhythm. 𝐈𝐵 was busy tending to those who had fallen, helping them regain their footing and composure. My eyes drifted over to the couch, where Deku lay sleeping peacefully, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. A strange urge pulled me toward him, and despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me, I felt compelled to approach. As I reached him, I gently cupped his chin in my hand and turned his face towards me. His features were softened in slumber, and there was something undeniably serene about him in that moment. Before I could second-guess myself, I leaned in and pressed my lips against his. They were surprisingly warm, a sensation that sent a jolt through me. It felt as if I had kissed those lips countless times before, yet this was my very first kiss, filled with a mix of innocence and newfound courage. As I pulled away, my heart raced, and I glanced at his sleeping face, wondering if I had awakened him. To my surprise, he murmured something softly, barely audible. "Lucian," he sighed in his sleep, the name floating through the air like a whisper. My heart sank at the mention of that name. It felt like an ice-cold splash of reality against the warmth of our moment. Instinctively, I backed away, my mind racing. Without thinking, I turned on my heel and dashed back home, the world around me blurring as I ran. My cheeks burned hot with embarrassment, a mix of confusion and exhilaration coursing through me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within me. The kiss had awakened something new, a sensation I couldn't quite grasp. Was it excitement? Was it fear? All I knew was that Lucian was the prince's name, a name that now echoed in my thoughts, intertwining with the warmth of my first kiss and leaving me with a whirlwind of questions and emotions that I didn't yet understand. Shoto's perspective each night, without fail, I find myself consumed by the same dream, a vision so vivid it feels almost tangible. In it, I stand before a resplendent white castle, its grandeur gleaming under a moonlit sky. The air is serene, yet heavy with an unspoken mystery, as if the castle itself holds secrets meant for me to uncover. Despite its beauty, I remain utterly perplexed. Why am I drawn here? What significance does this place hold? Before I can make sense of it, the dream always reaches the same conclusion. A voice, a female voice, calls out, clear and earnest, "Deku." Her tone is achingly familiar, stirring something deep within me, yet I cannot pinpoint its source. The frustration of knowing I should recognize her, but being unable to, lingers long after I wake. It feels as though this dream is trying to tell me something important, but I'm left grasping at shadows. The voice lingers in my mind, a haunting echo of familiarity. It reminds me of someone from my school, someone we, the Sailor Guardians, had saved before. Yet, as I sift through the countless faces we've rescued, I find myself unable to pinpoint who it might be. There have been so many, each carrying their own struggles and stories, that the memory becomes a blur. Still, this voice stands out. It wasn't just a cry, it was laden with desperation, trembling with a wheezy, strained tone as though the girl was calling out through unbearable pain, perhaps even on the brink of collapse. That raw, agonizing sound gnaws at me, sparking a deep unease. She cried out for Deku. That was Midoriya's nickname, a name that only those close to him would know. Whoever this girl is, she has a connection to him, one strong enough to pull her voice into my dreams. If I can find her, maybe I can uncover what ties her to Midoriya, or why she haunts me so. A thought takes root, hesitant but persistent. Could she be the princess we've been searching for? The one who holds the answers to our purpose, our mission? If so, then finding her isn't just a goal, it's a necessity. Izuku's perspective, I didn't think so much about the fact someone kissed me. People were drunk at the ball, so I came to the conclusion it was a drunk madman, or woman who had kissed me. It was Sunday, so I was in my room writing in my notebook when I suddenly got a text from Shoto. "Shoto, Midoriya, I've been having this recurring dream, a white castle, and a girl calling out your name. Do you think it might be connected to our mission?" Izuku, a recurring dream. I've been having one too, it keeps happening over and over. Do you think all guardians experience dreams like these? Shoto, do you think we should involve Bakugo? We haven't seen him since the ball last night. Izuku, yeah, I think we should tell Kaken. How about we all meet up at a cafe and talk about everything together? Shoto, alright, that sounds reasonable. I opened the message and froze, my heart pounding. The words, "You're useless, you should just die," were like a punch to the gut. It felt like no time had passed since that fight, and yet so much had changed. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking, feeling a knot in my chest. I hadn't spoken to Kaken online in years, and seeing those words brought everything rushing back. But I couldn't just let it sit there, not anymore. I took a deep breath, tried to steady myself, and began typing. Izuku, hey Kaken. How've you been? Kaken, what do you want Deku? Izuku, I was thinking maybe we could meet up at a cafe and talk about something related to the mission. Kaken, hell no. Not a chance. Izuku, Shoto's going to be there too if that makes you want to come. Read Izuku, Kaken please. We've been having these strange dreams lately, and we need to know if you're having them too so we can talk about it. Frowning face, Kaken, strange dreams. Who the hell cares about that CRP? Just shake it off and get some sleep. If it's messin' with your head, stop overthinking it. Get up, kick some butt and move on. Izuku, it's important if it's about the princess/prince. Please come to the cafe. It's at C and we'll meet at 2 p.m. Read Izuku, so, are you coming then? Read Izuku, if you're coming at least answer me. Crying face, Kaken, K. I smiled triumphantly, a wave of excitement washing over me as I turned off my phone. Glancing at the clock on my nightstand, I noticed it was already 1:30 p.m., meaning I needed to get ready to leave if I wanted to meet up with Shoto and Kaken at the cafe. I made my way to my closet, rummaging through my clothes until I found a comfy t-shirt that felt soft against my skin and a pair of well-worn shorts that had seen better days. After shedding my previous outfit, I slipped into the fresh clothes. With a sense of comfort, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and paused for a moment, studying how my curly green hair tumbled wildly around my face. My mind wandered then, landing on thoughts of Kaken. I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of my daydreams. Silly images of him twirling around in a frilly dress popped into my head, followed by the even more ridiculous sight of him attempting to breakdance alongside Shoto in the middle of class. The thought had me smiling, and I felt a warmth spread through my cheeks, a blush creeping in that I didn't quite notice until I reached for a bracelet resting on my dresser. The bracelet was a simple trinket that Kaken had given me during our childhood. Its surface was engraved with the words, "Best friends forever." I gently clutched it in my palm, the memory of Kaken breaking the other half of the pair years ago lingering in my mind. Brushing my fingers over its cool surface, I felt a wave of nostalgia hit me. I slid the bracelet onto my wrist, the familiar weight of it bringing back a flood of memories, and made my way down the stairs. As I descended, I spotted my mother nestled in her favorite chair, engrossed in the pages of a newspaper. The normally cozy living room felt a bit heavier today, shadows of concern flitting across my mother's face. "Hey Mom, I'm heading out to the cafe with Shoto and Kaken for a bit. I plan to be back by 3 or 4. I said cheerfully while I bent down to tie my red, beaten-down shoes, the laces fraying slightly at the ends. However, just as I reached for the door handle, I felt a gentle hand on my arm. I turned to see my mother standing close, a worried expression etched deeply on her features. "I'm really worried, honey," she said softly, her voice tinged with concern. "There have been strange things happening in the city lately, and I can't shake off the fear that you might get hurt." I met her gaze with a reassuring smile, trying to alleviate the concern written all over her face. The warmth of her care enveloped me, but I wanted to assure her I would be safe. "Trust me. I'll be fine," I assured her, attempting to sound more confident than I felt. She studied my face for a few moments, her eyes searching for any trace of uncertainty, before letting out a resigned sigh. "Just promise me you'll get home safely. And if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to text me," she replied, her voice tinged with concern. I nodded, a weak smile creeping onto my face, and waved goodbye as I stepped out into the cool evening air. The door clicked shut behind me, and I began my walk toward the cafe. With each step, I fixated on the pavement, my mind racing with thoughts. The familiar streets felt eerily quiet, and an unsettling feeling churned in my stomach, a sense that something unexpected was lurking just around the corner. It was a disquieting thought that I couldn't shake off, and it left me feeling a mix of fear and anxiety as I continued on my way. As I hurried down the bustling street, lost in my thoughts, I inadvertently bumped into someone. For just a brief moment, a vision of a white castle flashed in my mind before the contact between us faded. I quickly looked up to see Izuku Midoriya standing in front of me, concern etched on her face. "Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Deku-kun," she exclaimed, extending a hand to help me up. I accepted her assistance, grateful as I brushed some dirt off my clothes. "No, it's completely my fault, Midoriya. I wasn't paying attention at all," I replied sheepishly, trying to subdue the flush creeping onto my cheeks. At that moment, my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket, jolting me back to reality. I glanced at the screen and saw a furious message from Kaken. "Where the hell are you? I don't want to be stuck with 𝐕𝘃𝗁. A sigh escaped me as I looked back at Midoriya, who seemed to sense my growing anxiety. "I'm sorry, but I'm in a bit of a rush right now. Can we catch up later?" I asked, my tone apologetic. She nodded, her expression understanding, but I could see her disappointment. Without further delay, I began speed walking toward the cafe, my cheeks still slightly pink from the unexpected encounter and the urgency of my situation. As I pushed through the door of the cafe, the familiar smell of coffee washed over me. I spotted Kaken sitting at a table, his leg bouncing angrily as if it had a mind of its own. Across from him sat Shoto, his gaze focused intently on the steaming cup in front of him, lost in thought. "Sorry to make you two wait. I'm here now," I announced, trying to sound cheerful, despite the rush and lingering embarrassment. Kaken made his usual disdainful th sound, his eyes fixed stubbornly ahead, as if I weren't even there. I glanced over at Shoto, who was sitting across from us, and caught him looking up from his steaming cup of tea. A warm, genuine smile broke across his face. "Midoriya, do you want something to drink?" he asked, his voice soft and inviting. I quickly shook my head, feeling a slight flutter of nerves as I settled down in the empty chair next to Kaken, trying to ignore the awkward space forming between us. "No, thank you," I replied, my voice steady but my heart racing. "I just really came here to talk about our situation anyway." Kaken suddenly adjusted his posture, sitting up straight and scooting a little farther away from me, which struck me as odd. I bit my lip, not wanting to bring it up but feeling a twinge of discomfort. After a moment of silence hung in the air, Kaken broke it with his usual boldness. "So, who's gonna talk about their dream first?" he said, his tone challenging yet curious. Shoto lifted the glass to his lips, savoring the coolness of the drink before gently placing it back on the table with a soft thunk. He leaned back, his gaze drifting off as if he were still tethered to the dream he just shared. "I can start," he said thoughtfully. I found myself on the moon, standing alone in front of a white castle that loomed silently against the star-speckled sky. There was nobody else around, it was just me. I felt like I was trapped, unable to move from that spot. But before the dream faded away, I heard a girl's voice calling out to me, saying, "Deku-kun, that's pretty much it." As he spoke, my heart raced, and my eyes widened in surprise. The sound of my nickname echoed in my mind, Deku-kun. It was familiar, a nickname I had received not just from anyone, but from someone special. Wait, hold on, Shoto," I interrupted, nearly leaning forward in my eagerness. "Did you say she said Deku-kun? Like my nickname? That's incredibly strange. I don't even know anyone who would call me that in your dream, unless, oh no, wait. That doesn't quite make sense." I paused, feeling a flurry of thoughts collide in my mind. But maybe it's someone we both know. Or maybe it's something symbolic. Gosh, this is so confusing. And the moon. Why the moon of all places? And the castle. A white castle. What could that even symbolize? It could represent something pure, Or maybe solitude, or I don't know. I felt my excitement building, twisting into a knot of curiosity and bewilderment. But why would you dream of a voice calling my name? And it was a girl's voice, you said. That part is throwing me off. I could almost see puzzle pieces shifting in my mind. I remembered voices I had heard before, but I just couldn't place them. I mean, someone has called me that before. Before I could finish my thought, 𝗂𝐽 grabbed the collar of my shirt, pulling me closer and locking his intense gaze onto mine, as if trying to read the hidden meanings in my eyes. Can you shut the F up for once? You know I hate your rambling and I do not want to hear it right now. I'm already pissed about something else and I swear I will slit your throat open if you keep doing it. Deku froze, his words catching in his throat as his wide eyes locked onto 𝗂𝐽's fiery gaze. He swallowed hard, his hands instinctively raising in a placating gesture. I'm sorry, 𝗂𝐽. I didn't mean to. I'll stop, I promise. His voice would waver slightly, but there'd still be an edge of concern in it. Are you okay? I mean, I know you said you're mad about something else, but, wait. Not that I'm prying. You're really tense and okay. I'll stop now. Stopping. He'd clamp his mouth shut, nervously fidgeting as if trying to physically restrain himself from saying anything more, all while anxiously watching for 𝗂𝐽's next move. 𝗂𝐽 finally released his tight grip on my collar, his frustration evident as he plopped down in his chair, crossing his arms defiantly. I exhaled a breath of relief, the tension that had filled the air dissipated slightly, and I turned my attention to Shoto, who was quietly observing the scene. My dream was quite different from yours, I began, trying to piece together the fragmented images that had lingered in my mind since waking. In it, a girl screamed the name, Prince Lucian. I'm assuming that's the prince's name, but the details are hazy. All I can clearly recall is a boy with striking blonde hair holding the girl's hand as they frantically fled from some unseen danger. Then, just like that, I woke up. I glanced back at 𝗂𝐽 and then at Shoto, their expressions murky and contemplative, filling me with a growing sense of unease. The silence hung heavily between us, and I felt a need to break it. Prince Lucian, it could very well be the name of the prince, Shoto remarked thoughtfully, sipping his drink with an air of seriousness that made me even more anxious. He seemed to be weighing his words carefully. The boy had blonde hair. Shoto prompted, recalling the fleeting images from my dream. I can't think of any other blonde-haired person besides Bakugo. His gaze shifted to 𝗂𝐽, who indeed sported messy, spiky blonde hair. But the idea that he could be the prince felt absurd. What do you think, Shoto? I asked, desperate for another opinion. Shoto scrutinized 𝗂𝐽 closely, his eyes narrowing as he assessed him from head to toe. After a moment, he shifted his gaze back to me, a glint of uncertainty in his expression. Honestly, I'd say he might just be our prince. 𝗂𝐽's reaction was instantaneous. He shot up, a fierce glare directed at Shoto that could have cut through steel. There's no way in hell I'd ever want to be a prince, he spat. This is all ridiculous. His voice dripped with disdain, and I could see the agitation simmering just beneath the surface, ready to explode at any moment. The weight of the situation hung heavily over us, leaving a sense of unease as we grappled with the bizarre connections unfolding before us. 𝗂𝐽, are you going to share your dream with us? I asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and encouragement. With an annoyed huff, 𝗂𝐽 snatched his phone from the table and strode to the front of the room, radiating a sense of frustration. He shot us a sharp glare, his brown eyes blazing with defiance. I don't need to tell you anything, he snapped, his voice dripping with contempt. I can figure it out on my own. I'm not some useless Deku, after all. His words hung heavily in the air as he turned on his heel, storming out of the room with all the certainty of someone who believed he had nothing to prove. 𝗂𝐽. Wait, I called out, but the door swung shut behind him with a dull thud, leaving Shoto and I in an uncomfortable silence. We exchanged looks, the unspoken tension between us palpable as we processed the encounter, left alone with our thoughts. Katsuki's perspective, I stormed out of the cafe, my chest heaving with anger and frustration. I don't need anyone's help, especially not Deku's. I can figure out if I'm the prince or not on my own. I can find the prince or princess without anyone's DMN assistance. The cool evening air stings my cheeks as I kick rocks along the sidewalk, each one skittering away like the thoughts I'm trying to bury. My fingers unconsciously tighten around my all-might card, the edges worn smooth from years of handling. It's always been a source of comfort, a reminder of strength. But right now, it doesn't calm me. Nothing does. I'm so pissed at Deku. 𝗵𝗃𝗃, 𝗵𝗃𝗁𝗍, princes and princesses, sailor guardians, myself. The words hiss out between clenched teeth, the venom in my voice startling even me. But it doesn't matter, I already hate myself anyway. By the time I reach home, my BLD feels like it's boiling. My mom greets me at the door, her usual bright tone grating against my nerves. I ignore her completely, stomping upstairs without so much as a glance in her direction. I slam my bedroom door shut behind me, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I glance around my room, searching for a distraction. Anything to keep me from spiraling further. My eyes land on my backpack, slumped against the chair. Without thinking, I grab it, yank out my notebook and laptop, and slam them onto my desk. Dropping into my chair, I force myself to focus on my homework, the familiar routine offering a shred of normalcy. But my thoughts betray me, creeping back to that stupid nerd. My hand tightens around my pen, my knuckles whitening as my jaw clenches. Why the hell does he always get under my skin like this? My grip tightens until I hear a sharp snap, the pen splitting in two, ink smearing my fingers. That's it. There's no way Deku is a prince. Or that I'm a prince. So what if the person in my dream and Deku look similar? The person I saw was a girl. Deku's not a girl. He's a boy. An annoying, ugly, big-eyed boy. He's useless, clumsy, and infuriating. Too nerdy. Too pathetic. You three are all sailor guardians. Your mission is to find and protect the prince or princess. The words echo in my mind like a curse, the weight of them pressing down on my chest. My head snaps up, my reflection staring back at me from the cracked mirror across the room. My teeth grit. My BLD pounds. And before I can stop myself, my fist connects with the glass. The sound of shattering glass rings out, sharp and final. Tiny shards scatter across the floor, glittering in the dim light as warm BLD drips from my knuckles. My breath comes in short, ragged bursts, my face twisted in fury. I've lost control again. 𝗓𝗠𝗵𝗲. What the hell was that? My mom's voice cuts through the haze, and I 𝗕𝗶 around to see her standing in the doorway. Her eyes dart to the broken mirror, then to my bleeding hand. Why the hell did you do that? She snaps, her tone a mix of anger and concern. You could have broken anything else in your room, but you chose to smash the diamond mirror. I stare at her, my chest still heaving, the pain in my hand finally starting to register. But it's not enough to drown out the storm raging inside me. Nothing ever is. Shut the hell up, old hag. The last thing I want right now is to hear your annoying voice. I snapped, my voice raw with frustration and pain. She ignored my outburst and grabbed my bleeding hand. I jerked back, glaring at her, but she held on tight, her grip firm and unyielding. Will you shut up and let me bandage this up? Then I'll leave your annoying butt alone. She shot back, her tone sharp enough to rival mine. I don't need your help. I don't need anyone's help. Just off. I growled, my voice breaking slightly at the end. I hated the way she always barged into my business, trying to play the savior when I didn't ask for it. I didn't need her. I didn't need anyone. But, as usual, she didn't budge. Without waiting for my permission, she dragged me down the hall to the bathroom, her nails digging into my wrist like steel claws. I stumbled after her, too stunned to fight back immediately. She turned the sink on, the sound of rushing water filling the room. I'm your mother, Katsuki. I'm allowed to help you, whether you like it or not. She barked, her voice as fiery as ever. I tried to yank my hand away again, but she was faster, forcing it under the cold stream of water. The sting hit instantly, sharp and biting. I hissed through my teeth, the pain shooting up my arm, but I didn't say anything else. There was no point. She'd already won this round. I stood there in stubborn silence as she cleaned the wound, her hands surprisingly gentle despite her earlier roughness. My pride burned hotter than the pain in my hand. I didn't need this. I didn't need her. Asking for help was something weak people did, and I wasn't weak. I was Katsuki Bakugo, straight A student, the top of my class, the one everyone feared and respected. I wasn't weak, and I sure as hell didn't need anyone else to fix my mistakes. She finished wrapping the bandage around my hand and tied it off with a quick, practiced motion. Her eyes softened slightly as she looked at me, though her expression still carried its usual exasperation. "Look," she said, her voice lowering a notch, "you really need to learn how to control that demon temper of yours. I can't keep replacing the stuff you break every time you lose it. Mirrors don't grow on trees, you know." I rolled my eyes but stayed silent. She sighed, placing her hands on her hips. "Sometimes you need to just stop. Go outside, look at the moon or whatever and think. Think before you act, Katsuki. God damn it, you're gonna end up breaking more than just furniture one of these days if you don't get a grip." I glanced down at my bandaged hand, the faint throb in my knuckles a stark reminder of her words. She grabbed her purse from the counter and headed for the door. "I'm going to work. Don't break anything else, you brat," she added, throwing a pointed look over her shoulder before slamming the door behind her. I stood there alone in the bathroom, my chest still tight with lingering anger, her words echoing in my mind. Think before you act. Easier said than done. I trudged back to my room, the dull ache in my bandaged hand a constant reminder of my outburst. Flopping onto my bed, I let out a heavy sigh, staring up at the ceiling. How ironic, I thought bitterly, that the old hag told me to stare at the moon and think about my actions. As if gazing at some glowing rock in the sky was going to fix anything. "The moon," his voice echoed in my mind, unbidden but clear as day. "It showed me you were in trouble and my body moved on its own. I just knew you needed me." I clenched my teeth, a scowl tugging at the corners of my mouth. I'm an idiot, thinking about this stupid, heartfelt nonsense. The memory of that night, of the moon glowing brighter than it ever should have, of Deku standing there like some kind of idiot savior, played on a loop in my head. The whole thing felt unreal, like some freaky cosmic joke. The moon did some pretty freaky I thought grimly, my lips twitching into a humorless smile. The sun and the moon, opposites but somehow connected. I let out a dry chuckle at the absurdity of it all, my anger softening just enough for exhaustion to creep in. Shutting my eyes, I muttered under my breath, "I'm gonna sleep this off. No more of this sappy bullshit." But even as I tried to let the darkness of sleep pull me under, the memory of that night, and the way he'd looked at me, like I mattered, refused to leave. I ended up drifting into an uneasy sleep, but a strange, warm sensation in my chest pulled me out of it. My eyes fluttered open in the darkness of my room, and immediately, a wave of distress washed over me. My breathing quickened as my mind was flooded with a vivid vision. A brunette girl running, her face pale with fear, as a mannequin chased her through the shadows. My heart pounded in my chest as the vision faded, leaving behind an unbearable urge to act. I shot upright, fumbling for my all-might keychain on the nightstand. My fingers found the familiar shape, and I clutched it tightly in my fist. The warmth in my chest seemed to intensify, flooding my veins with energy as a burst of light surrounded me. In an instant I had transformed. Without hesitation, I sprinted to the window, throwing it open. A shimmering path of sparkles descended from the moon, beckoning me forward. Without a second thought, I leaped out, using my explosions to propel myself through the air. The sparkles guided me like a celestial trail, glowing faintly in the night. The wind whipped past me as I soared over rooftops, my mind focused on the girl in my vision. When I finally reached the scene, my stomach turned. There she was, the brunette girl from my vision, cornered and trembling as the mannequin loomed over her like a predator. "Get the hell away from her!" I roared, propelling myself forward with a massive blast. My explosion tore through the air, aiming directly for the mannequin. But to my shock, it giggled, a chilling, hollow sound, and dodged my attack with unnatural speed. My fury surged as I launched a flurry of explosions, each one brighter and louder than the last. The mannequin, unfazed, weaved through them with a sickening grace. Before I could adjust my aim, it lunged at me, its cold, jointed hand grabbing my head in a vice-like grip. Pain shot through my skull as it squeezed, and its glassy eyes turned an eerie red, locking onto mine. I couldn't look away. My body froze, my limbs refusing to obey me. 𝐭𝐽. The familiar voice cut through the haze in my mind, sharp and urgent. My blood boiled at the sound of it, but before I could react, everything blurred and my vision dimmed. My body felt weightless for a moment, then I was falling. I hit the ground hard, my knees buckling beneath me. A brilliant green light flared in the distance, piercing through the fog clouding my senses. Through half-lidded eyes, I saw the source, Deku's diamond glowing with an intense energy as he charged toward me. The light grew closer, but the sounds around me were muffled, distorted. I tried to move, to get back on my feet, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Above me, the mannequin now had Deku in its grasp, its hand wrapped tightly around his neck. My heart raced. I had to get up. I had to help him. My fingers twitched, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't move. "Ku," I rasped, my voice barely audible. Before I could blink, a pink light erupted nearby, illuminating the scene. The brunette girl from my vision stood tall, her expression fierce as the light enveloped her. Her form shifted, and when the glow subsided, she was clad in a sailor suit, radiating an otherworldly power. With a determined gaze, she raised her hands, sending the mannequin floating into the air. It thrashed violently, but her grip was unyielding. Her hands came together, and the mannequin plummeted to the ground, lifeless. Turned her attention to Deku, catching him mid-fall with a graceful touch before he hit the ground. As the adrenaline wore off, my body gave out, and I de-transformed, my outfit reverting to casual clothes. I lay there, my chest heaving as exhaustion weighed me down. But then, warmth spread through my hand, and I felt a surge of energy return to me. My eyes fluttered open, and the first thing I saw was Deku's panicked face hovering over me. The brunette was beside him, her eyes filled with worry. Once I felt strong enough to move, I scowled and slapped Deku's hand away, sitting up with a grunt. "The hell do you think you're doing, Deku?" I snapped, my voice laced with frustration, though my heart was still racing. "𝐭𝐽, you passed out," Deku said softly, his voice tinged with concern. His wide, emerald green eyes stared down at me, filled with worry that made my blood boil. I clenched my fists, the warmth in my chest intensifying as I fought the urge to gouge those stupid, innocent eyes out. "Where the hell is the DMN villain?" I growled, my voice hoarse but sharp as I scanned the area. The memory of the mannequin gripping my head was still fresh, and I needed to know it was gone. The brunette girl stepped forward, her sailor suit gleaming under the pale moonlight. "I defeated them," she said, her voice steady and confident. "I'm Sailor Uravity. My real name is Izuku Midoriya." She extended a hand to me, her expression friendly and inviting. I scoffed, batting her hand away as I forced myself to stand. My legs wobbled and I stumbled forward, colliding with Deku's chest. He caught me instinctively, his hands gripping my shoulders to steady me. "𝐭𝐽, are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft but still annoyingly filled with that DMN concern. I shoved him away, ignoring the way my hands lingered on his chest for a split second too long. My chest felt warm and tight, and the unfamiliar sensation only added to my frustration. I hated it. I hated not knowing what the hell was wrong with me. "Shut the F up. I'm fine, I snapped, glaring at him before turning my attention to the brunette. My finger jabbed in her direction, my eyes narrowing. "And you, how the hell do you have our power?" Izuku tilted her head slightly, placing a finger to her chin as if she were pondering my question. Then she smiled, her expression bright and almost childlike. "I'm the princess." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Deku's jaw dropped, his eyes widening in shock. I raised an eyebrow, crossing my arms over my chest. "The princess?" I let out a derisive laugh. Yeah, sure. That's rich. There was no way. She didn't even look like the princess. The person in my dreams, the one I was supposed to find, they were elegant, radiant, practically glowing with otherworldly grace. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 just looked normal. Too normal. There was no way this clumsy, cheerful girl could be the same person. 𝗧𝗵𝗲's smile faltered slightly, but she stood her ground, her gaze steady as if she knew something I didn't. I hated that look. It made me feel like I was missing something important, and I hated being out of the loop. You aren't the 𝗕𝗵𝗲 princess. The princess looked different, I snapped, my voice dripping with disdain as I glared at 𝗧𝗵𝗲. For a moment, her gentle expression faltered, her eyes widening in shock. But just as quickly she recovered, her face softening into that same annoyingly calm look. It pissed me off more than it should have. She didn't have the right to look so composed. Not after spouting something so ridiculous. 𝗂𝐭𝐻, do you know how the princess looks like? Deku's voice cut through my thoughts, his tone cautious but curious. My stomach tightened as his words hit me. I clenched my jaw, my fists curling at my sides. I turned sharply on my heel, refusing to answer, and started walking away. The last thing I wanted to do was give them anything, especially him. But before I could take more than a few steps, a hand grabbed my wrist, halting me in my tracks. 𝗂𝐭𝐻, if you know something, please tell us. Deku's voice was desperate now, his grip firm but not forceful. I froze, my teeth grinding together. My body tensed with the overwhelming urge to turn around and deck him right there. He was being so 𝗕𝗵𝗲 annoying, so 𝗕𝗵𝗲 Deku. Always prying, always pushing, always trying to play the hero. I don't have to tell you anything. I snarled, yanking my arm in an attempt to free myself. I told you I can figure this out on my own. His grip didn't falter, and when I finally turned to face him, his brows were furrowed, his expression somewhere between frustration and pleading. 𝗂𝐭𝐻, we're a team. We have the same mission. You can't just. 𝗧𝗵𝗲's voice interrupted, soft but firm. I truly am the princess. She placed a hand on Deku's arm, gently pulling him away from me. The second his grip loosened, I didn't hesitate. I bolted. I didn't care where I was running, I just needed to get away from them. From him. My heart pounded as I tore down the street, my chest tight and my mind racing. This was all bullshit. The princess, the mission, the stupid moon, it was all bullshit. I kept running, ignoring the burning in my legs and the ache in my bandaged hand. When I couldn't run any further, I slowed to a stop on the sidewalk, doubling over to catch my breath. My hand instinctively brushed against my wrist where Deku had grabbed me. His touch still lingered, warm and infuriatingly present. I clenched my fist, my nails digging into my palm as I tried to shake the sensation. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop thinking about him. About the way he'd looked at me, with those wide, pleading eyes like I was the only person in the world who could give him an answer. Like I mattered. I hated. My chest felt tight, my breaths coming shallow as the thought repeated in my head. I hated. I hated. I hated. I slammed my fist against a nearby lamppost, the dull clang echoing into the quiet night. My vision blurred with frustration, my mind a storm of emotions I couldn't name. All I knew was that I needed to figure this out on my own. I couldn't let Deku or anyone else get in my way. I stayed hunched over, breathing hard, the cold air biting at my skin as sweat trickled down the back of my neck. My hand throbbed where it hit the lamppost, but I didn't care. The pain was grounding, a reminder that I was still here, still fighting to stay in control. My thoughts raced, louder and louder, overlapping and tangling in a way that made my head P&D. Why the hell couldn't I shake him from my mind? The way his stupid voice cracked when he said my name, the warmth of his grip on my wrist, the demon look in his eyes, it wouldn't leave me alone. I slammed my fist against the post again, harder this time, letting out a guttural growl. Deku, I muttered through gritted teeth, his name tasting like venom on my tongue. Why did he always have to make everything so complicated? I wasn't weak, I didn't need him, I didn't need anyone. So why did he keep pushing himself into my space, into my head? I stumbled back, leaning against the lamppost for support as I glared up at the sky. The moon hung there, bright and mocking, as if it knew something I didn't. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let the weight in my chest pull me down. "This is bullshit," I hissed, wiping the sweat off my face with the back of my hand. "I don't need him. I don't need them. I'll figure this out by myself, just like I always do." But even as I said the words, the warmth in my chest remained stubborn and unwelcome. It wasn't just the way Deku looked at me, it was the way I felt when he did. Like something deep inside me, something I didn't want to admit existed, stirred to life. I shook my head violently, shoving the thought away. "No. I'm not weak. I don't have time for this CRP." I forced myself to keep walking, each step heavy and deliberate as I shoved my hands into my pockets. The streets were quiet, the distant hum of a car engine the only sound. As I walked, I glanced down at my wrist where his hand had been. The memory of his grip made my stomach churn, my heart lurching in a way that pissed me off even more. "I hate it," I muttered under my breath. "I hate him." But even as I said it, the words rang hollow in my ears. I shoved my hands deeper into my pockets, my fingers curling into fists. The cold night air bit at my face, but it wasn't enough to cool the fire burning in my chest. Every step felt heavier than the last, like my body was weighed down by emotions I didn't want to name. I hated feeling this way, out of control, confused, and angry at something I couldn't punch. I kept walking, my boots scuffing against the pavement. My thoughts circled back to Deku, no matter how much I tried to force them somewhere else. His face kept flashing in my mind, those wide green eyes filled with worry, that stupid voice calling out to me, the way he looked at me like I was something more than I was. Like I was someone worth caring about. My stomach twisted, and I growled under my breath. Demon nerd always sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. Who the hell does he think he is? I stopped at a small park, the empty benches and darkened playground casting long shadows under the streetlights. I leaned against a tree, crossing my arms tightly over my chest as I glared at nothing in particular. My mind wouldn't shut up, no matter how much I wanted it to. That stupid hand on my wrist, it wouldn't leave me alone. The warmth of it lingered, like he'd branded me somehow. My gaze dropped to my wrist again, and I clenched it tightly in my other hand, trying to rub the sensation away. But it wouldn't go. It was like he'd left a mark, one I couldn't see but could feel deep under my skin. And the worst part, it didn't piss me off as much as it should have. It scared me. The thought hit me hard, and I straightened up, shaking my head violently. No way. I don't get scared. I'm Katsuki F. Bakugo. I'm not scared of some stupid nerd or his dumb feelings. I shoved off the tree and started pacing, the sound of my boots crunching against the grass echoing in the silence. My hands were shaking, and I clenched them tighter to stop it, but it didn't help. Deku's voice echoed in my head again. "Kaken, we're a team." I scoffed, my lip curling in disdain. "Team? What a joke," I muttered. "I don't need a DMN team. I don't need anyone." But even as I said it, my chest tightened painfully. I let out a frustrated yell, spinning around and punching the tree as hard as I could. The bark scraped against my knuckles, and the sting felt good, real, tangible, something I could deal with. I stood there for a moment, my forehead resting against the tree as I tried to steady my breathing. The night was too quiet, and it made the chaos in my head feel even louder. I hated this. I hated feeling like I was spiraling out of control. My mind drifted back to Ochiko's words. "I truly am the princess." My jaw tightened, and I let out a sharp laugh. "Yeah, right. She doesn't look like the princess. She doesn't feel like the princess. None of this makes any DMN sense." And then there was Deku. That idiot, with his glowing diamond and his stupid face. The way he'd jumped in to save me, the way his light had cut through the darkness when I was too weak to do anything. The way he'd looked at me like I was someone he didn't want to lose. I slammed my fist into the tree again, harder this time. "Demon it, Deku. Get out of my head." But no matter how much I yelled, no matter how many times I hit the tree, his face wouldn't leave my mind. That warmth in my chest wouldn't go away. It scared me, infuriated me, and somewhere deep down, I didn't want to admit why. I turned away from the tree, my hands trembling as I stuffed them back into my pockets. My steps were slower now, aimless as I walked through the park. The moon hung high above me, its light casting an eerie glow over everything. "Why the hell do you make me feel like this, Deku?" I muttered under my breath, my voice barely audible. The question hung in the air, unanswered as I kept walking, trying to outrun the thoughts chasing me. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't escape them. Or him. I then headed home in silence. Izuku's perspective, I watched as Deku stared down at his hand, his fingers flexing slightly as if he was still holding on to something, or someone. His expression faltered, his usual determined look replaced by a hint of disappointment that tugged at my chest. "Deku-kun, are you okay?" I asked gently, tilting my head as I tried to meet his gaze. He blinked as if snapping out of a trance, and turned to look at me. His emerald eyes still held a trace of worry, but he forced a smile and nodded. "I'm fine." "So, you're really the princess?" The question hung in the air, heavy with disbelief. I swallowed hard and glanced down, my fingers brushing against the yellow diamond that now glowed faintly on my forehead. The warmth it gave off was reassuring, a small reminder of who I was, or who I was supposed to be. "Yes," I said quietly, nodding as I mustered a small smile. I knew this wasn't easy for them to accept. It wasn't easy for me either. Deku's brows furrowed, his mind clearly racing with thoughts I couldn't begin to guess. "So, we have to protect you?" he asked, his voice careful, almost hesitant. I nodded again, my heart pounding as I felt the weight of their stares. They didn't know yet, but there was so much more to this than just protecting me. They hadn't fully awakened to their roles, their pasts, their powers. They didn't know what was at stake, not yet. And I couldn't tell them. Not until the time was right. "Deku-kun," I said softly, forcing a cheerful tone to lighten the mood, "I think you're free to go. I can make it home myself." I hoped my words would ease some of the tension, but Deku immediately shook his head, his determination snapping back into place like a RBB band. "No," he said firmly, stepping closer to me. His eyes burned with a resolve that made my heart skip a beat. "If you're the princess, I have to bring you home. It's my responsibility to protect you." I blinked in surprise at the strength in his voice, at the way he stood there, unwavering despite everything that had just happened. I could see it in his eyes, the fierce loyalty, the drive to help no matter the cost. "Deku-kun," I trailed off, my words caught in my throat. For a moment I felt overwhelmed. He didn't even fully understand the gravity of his role yet, but here he was, ready to throw himself into danger without hesitation. Before I could say anything more, Deku glanced in the direction Kaken had run off. His lips pressed into a thin line, and his hands balled into fists at his sides. "He'll come around," Deku murmured, almost as if trying to convince himself. Then he turned back to me, his expression softening. "For now, let's get you home. You're too important to be out here alone." I smiled at him, though my chest tightened with the weight of his words. There was so much he didn't know yet, so much he couldn't understand. But his determination, his unshakable kindness, it was enough to make me believe in him. "Okay, Deku-kun," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Let's go." As we started walking, the glow of the moon above seemed to grow brighter, casting its light on the two of us. My heart was heavy with the knowledge I carried, but for now, I let myself lean on his unwavering resolve. Even if he didn't fully understand, I knew I could count on him. A few weeks had passed since we met Deku and Bakugo, and things were starting to come together. We had gained 2 new Sailor Guardians, Ijiro Kirishima and Mina Ishido. They were both amazing additions to the team, with heroic spirits and powers that were, honestly, pretty awesome. Kirishima's ability to harden his skin made him practically indestructible, and Mina's acid attacks were both versatile and devastating. Not that I was surprised, I had a feeling about them even before they awakened. I was sitting in the underground bunker, a hidden base filled with high-tech equipment that looked like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. Monitors flickered with streams of data, and holographic maps projected onto the walls showed areas we were monitoring for enemy activity. The hum of machines was a constant background noise, a reminder of the work we still had to do. Across from me floated Nene, my tiny, glowing companion who acted as both a guide and a source of wisdom. Her usual cheerful demeanor was replaced with a more serious expression as she hovered above me, her light casting faint shadows on the desk where I worked. 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗔, 𝗬𝗏 began, her tone firm, when are you going to tell them the truth? Their memories will be unlocked one day, whether you're ready or not. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard of the sleek computer in front of me. Her words hit a nerve, but I tried not to let it show. Soon, I said, my voice steady even though my chest tightened at the thought. But first, I have to locate the prince and the princess. 𝗬𝗏 crossed her small arms, her glow flickering slightly as she floated closer. We can't even be certain there will be a prince and a princess. It could be two princes or two princesses. We don't know who they'll be yet, and time isn't on our side. I sighed, leaning back in my chair and rubbing my temples. She wasn't wrong, and I hated that. I know 𝗬𝗏, but there has to be something consistent. They've got to look similar at least, right? If I remember correctly, I paused, the faint image of the two figures from my fragmented memories coming to mind. The prince had spiky blonde hair, and the princess had long, curly green hair. 𝗬𝗏 floated down until she landed lightly on the palm of my hand, her small weight barely noticeable. Her bright eyes softened as she looked up at me. I'm sure you'll recognize them when the time comes, she said with a reassuring smile. I couldn't help but smile back, her optimism contagious despite the weight of the mission on my shoulders. I hope so, I said quietly, glancing at the monitors around us. I really hope so. As 𝗬𝗏 floated back into the air, I turned my attention back to the screen in front of me, scanning the data for anything that could give us a lead. The others didn't know yet about their pasts, their connections, or the role they would each play in the battles ahead. But I did. I carried the burden of that knowledge, and it was up to me to make sure they were ready when the truth finally came to light. I was scrolling through some notes on my tablet when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Deku. We're having a meeting at the cafe. Would you like to join us? Simple and polite, as always. I smiled softly and typed back a quick response, I'll be there. Shutting down my computer, I gathered my things and prepared to leave the bunker. 𝗬𝗏, who had been floating nearby, gave me a curious look before she shimmered and vanished into thin air. She always did that when she knew I needed to focus. I appreciated her, even though I sometimes wished she'd stick around for moral support during these meetings. The walk to the cafe was peaceful, the cool breeze carrying the faint scent of winter as I made my way through the quiet streets. When I arrived, the cafe's warm glow and familiar chatter greeted me. Inside, everyone was already gathered, their voices blending with the soft hum of the coffee machines. Kirishima and Mina were sitting together, laughing about something while sipping on steaming mugs of cocoa. Deku was animatedly talking with them, gesturing with his hands like he always did when he was excited. Todoroki sat nearby, calmly stirring his tea, a faint smile tugging at his lips as he listened to the conversation. And then there was Bakugo. He sat at the far end of the table, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed and a scowl on his face. A glass of water sat untouched in front of him. He looked as though he was barely tolerating the meeting, his sharp crimson eyes scanning the room but avoiding direct contact with anyone. As I walked in, everyone, except Bakugo, turned to look at me, their faces lighting up with welcoming smiles. Princess, they all said in unison, their voices bright and warm. I felt a flush of embarrassment creep up my neck but managed to smile back. Hi, everyone, I said, my voice soft but steady. Bakugo, predictably, scoffed loudly and grabbed his glass, taking a long sip of water. The disdain on his face was evident, as though he couldn't be bothered to acknowledge my presence. I tried not to let it bother me, but his attitude had been grating on my nerves for weeks now. He wasn't just skeptical of me being the princess, he was outright hostile, always keeping to himself and refusing to share what he knew. And I knew he was hiding something. What did he know that he wasn't telling us? Why couldn't he just be a team player for once? Shaking off the frustration, I made my way to the table and took a seat next to Mina. She gave me an excited smile and leaned in close. We were just talking about our last patrol. Kirishima had the worst luck. He got drenched in the rain. I laughed softly, trying to let her enthusiasm distract me from Bakugo's standoffish behavior. That sounds rough, I said, glancing around the table. Deku's eyes met mine, and he gave me a reassuring smile, as if silently saying he was glad I came. But no matter how warm and welcoming the others were, I couldn't shake the tension that lingered at the edge of the room, right where Bakugo sat, brooding and silent. He didn't trust me. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't trust him either. Izuku's perspective. The cafe buzzed with the hum of conversation as we talked about the events of the day. Mina animatedly recounted a funny moment from patrol, and Kirishima chimed in with his usual enthusiasm. I smiled, nodding along, but my attention kept drifting toward Kaken. He sat at the edge of the group, his arms crossed, his fiery red eyes fixed somewhere far away. Ever since Achiko revealed herself as the princess, he'd been quieter than usual, less explosive but more intense. His scowls were sharper, his glares longer. I could feel the tension radiating off him like heat from a stove, and I wanted to ask if he was okay. Just as I opened my mouth to say something, a deafening explosion rattled the air outside, cutting through the cafe's warmth like a knife. Everyone froze, our eyes darting to one another in silent understanding. Without a word, we all bolted out of the cafe, the mission taking precedence. Once outside, we each grabbed our All Might keychains and squeezed them tightly. In an instant, our transformations activated, and the air around us shimmered with energy. Before us stood a man in a skin-tight bodysuit that covered his entire form. He wasn't alone. He was multiplying, creating doubles of himself that swarmed the streets, terrorizing innocent bystanders. Chaos erupted as civilians screamed and fled in every direction. Before I could process what to do, Kaken had already launched himself into the fray, explosions crackling from his palms. His familiar battle cry echoed through the streets, "Die!" But the villain smirked as one of his doubles appeared in front of Kaken, blocking his attack. "Are you the Sailor Guardians?" the villain sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. "No way. You're too ugly." Mina let out an audible gasp, clutching her chest in exaggerated offense. "We aren't ugly. You're ugly," she shot back, her voice full of indignation. The villain ignored her and turned his attention to Achiko, pointing a hand in her direction. She immediately dropped into a fighting stance, ready to defend herself. But before she could act, everyone else moved instinctively, forming a protective wall in front of her. "Protect the princess," Kirishima shouted, his voice filled with determination. His skin gleamed as he hardened himself, ready for any attack. Kaken, however, scoffed loudly, glaring at the rest of us. "I'm not protecting a wannabe princess," he barked, his explosions flaring up as he turned back to face the enemy. I ignored his comment and stepped in front of Achiko myself, throwing a punch that sent a wave of the villain's doubles flying. They melted into a disgusting puddle of goop as they hit the ground. The villain cackled, doubling over in mock laughter. "Geez, you guys 𝐒𝐭𝐳. I think I'm gonna pee my pants." Kirishima let out a small laugh despite himself, but he didn't let it distract him. He charged forward, smashing through more of the villain's doubles with ease. "Hang on," the villain said, straightening up as his eyes landed on Achiko. "That's the princess. Pu. All right, hand over one for all." "Well, you don't have to, but you gotta." My stomach twisted at the mention of one for all. How did he know about that? I tilted my head, trying to make sense of his bizarre way of speaking, but before I could analyze it further, the villain surged forward, his doubles closing in on us. Shoto stepped in with his usual calm precision, raising a hand and sending shards of ice shooting toward the villain. The ice spread rapidly, trapping the villain and several of his doubles in a frozen cage. The villain's body shivered, but he laughed maniacally. "So cold." "Nah, it's really hot." Kaken growled under his breath, his hands already sparking with more explosions. "Shut the hell up already," he snapped, lunging forward again. The battle wasn't over yet, and the stakes felt higher than ever. But as we fought, I couldn't help but glance back at Achiko. The weight of protecting her, and the secrets she held, pressed heavy on my shoulders. The sound of Kaken's body slamming into the wall reverberated through the street, sharp and unforgiving. My chest tightened as I saw him slump to the ground, his nose already trickling with BLD. His usual fire seemed momentarily extinguished, and for a split second he looked almost vulnerable. "Kaken!" I shouted, taking a step toward him, ready to help. But before I could move any further, Kirishima's hand clamped down firmly on my shoulder, stopping me in my tracks. "Midoriya," he said, his voice low but steady. "The princess is our top priority right now. Stay focused." I froze, torn between my duty and my instincts. My eyes darted back to Kaken, who was already pulling himself up, his movements sharp and defiant despite the BLD smeared across his face. He wiped at his nose with the back of his hand, his crimson eyes blazing with fury. "𝗵𝗵𝗵𝗺, Kaken snarled, his voice low and dangerous. The villain, still smirking, turned his gaze toward Izuku, ignoring the rest of us. "If you want to keep your precious friends safe, princess, then meet me at the top of UA High School's rooftop." His voice dripped with mockery as he pointed directly at her. Izuku's shoulders tensed, and she glared at him, her teeth gritted in frustration. Her usual warm and gentle demeanor was replaced with something fierce and unyielding. Mina spun around to face Izuku, her expression a mix of worry and determination. "Princess, don't do it. It might be a trap," she exclaimed, her voice trembling slightly. The air around us felt heavy, the villain's challenge hanging in the balance. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms as I struggled to think. Kaken was still recovering, Izuku was in danger, and the villain's intentions were unclear. Izuku didn't respond right away. Her gaze stayed locked on the villain, her lips pressed into a thin line as if she was weighing her options. She was strong, so much stronger than people gave her credit for, but the burden she carried as the princess was impossible to ignore. Kirishima stepped closer to her, his voice softer now. "Izuku, listen. You don't have to do this. We'll find another way." But Izuku shook her head, her determination unwavering. "If it's me they want, I can't let anyone else get hurt because of me," she said quietly, her words resolute. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "There has to be another way," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We can fight this together, as a team. You don't have to face him alone." But deep down, I knew Izuku was already making her decision. The weight of her role as the princess was something none of us could fully understand, and she wouldn't let anyone else suffer on her behalf. As I looked at her, standing tall and unshaken despite the fear in her eyes, I felt a surge of admiration and a flicker of dread. If she went to the rooftop, we'd have to be ready for anything. And I wasn't sure we were. As the swirling portal opened, a powerful gust of wind swept through the area, pulling the villain toward it. His mocking laughter echoed for a brief moment before he vanished into the void, leaving behind only the eerie silence of the aftermath. I surged forward, trying to reach him, but it was too late. He was gone. I stopped in my tracks, frustration bubbling in my chest. My fists clenched tightly at my sides as I bit back a pout. Around me, the others began to cheer, their relief palpable. Kirishima and Mina high-fived, while Shoto simply gave a small nod of satisfaction. Bakugo walked toward them, a wide, wolfish grin on his face, clearly pleased with his performance. I turned my attention to him and hurried over, my concern outweighing my hesitation. "Dynamite," I called, stumbling over my words. "You're bleeding." He turned to look at me, his crimson eyes narrowing slightly. BLD still trickled from his nose, a stark contrast against his pale skin. Without thinking, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, holding it out to him. "Here," I said softly. Kaken's expression shifted for a split second, so fast I almost missed it, before he snatched the handkerchief from my hand with a huff. He pressed it to his nose, his movements rough but deliberate. "I'll clean it and return it back to you later," he muttered, his gaze darting away from mine. His usual scowl remained firmly in place, but there was something almost uncertain in his tone. I blinked, surprised by the offer. "No, it's all right. You don't have to, just shut up and let me do this," he snapped, his voice gruff but not as harsh as usual. The words stung slightly, but I nodded and stepped back, deciding not to push him any further. "Okay," I murmured, glancing down at my hands. As I stood there, unsure of what to say next, I caught sight of Izuku watching us from a distance. Her expression was uncharacteristically serious, her brows furrowed as she observed the interaction. I took a step toward her, intending to ask what was wrong, but before I could say anything, she turned on her heel and walked away, her shoulders tense. Izuku's perspective. I couldn't tear my eyes away from them. Izuku and Bakugo. There was something in the way they interacted, a dynamic so familiar it sent a chill down my spine. The way Izuku looked at him with that unwavering concern, and the way Bakugo reluctantly accepted it, all while trying to maintain his tough facade, it was as though I'd seen it play out countless times before. It wasn't just their actions. It was a feeling, deep and instinctive, like an echo of something long forgotten, but now wasn't the time to dwell on it. The villain's words lingered in my mind, a foreboding reminder of what lay ahead. He wanted me, and he was willing to hurt my friends to get to me. I couldn't let that happen. I clenched my fists, determination coursing through me. If the villain wanted a fight, I'd give him one. I'd meet him on the rooftop of UA High School tonight, just as he demanded. I wouldn't let anyone else get hurt because of me. I'd defeat him and return home safely. At least, that's what I told myself. The night air was cool against my skin as I stood in front of UA High School. Its towering silhouette loomed ominously under the faint light of the moon. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was something I had to do, for the sake of my friends. With a deep breath, I activated my transformation. The light from my yellow diamond glowed briefly before I felt the familiar shift in power. Touching my fingertips to my body, I activated my quirk, floating effortlessly upward until I reached the rooftop. As I landed softly on the flat surface, I saw him, the villain. He stood in the shadows, holding a glowing crystal in his hand. His smirk was wide and taunting, his red eyes glinting with malice. "Looks like the princess showed up," he said mockingly, holding the crystal up for emphasis. "Hand over one for all." "Nah, actually, don't bother. I'll take it myself." I narrowed my eyes and shook my head firmly, standing tall despite the fear clawing at my chest. "I am not handing you one for all." The villain's expression darkened. He clicked his tongue in annoyance and then smiled again, a twisted, unnerving grin. "Suit yourself, princess," he said, his voice dripping with menace. With a wave of his hand, doubles of himself began to emerge from the shadows, surrounding me. I gritted my teeth and prepared to fight. I used my martial arts training and quirk to evade and strike back, managing to hold my own against the copies. But then the crystal in his hand began to glow brighter, casting an unnatural light across the rooftop. Suddenly, the city below plunged into darkness. Streetlights flickered and died, windows went black, and an eerie silence blanketed the area. I paused for a moment, glancing around in alarm. The villain took the opportunity to launch more attacks, forcing me to leap and dodge with quick reflexes. I was losing ground. Sweat dripped down my temple as I tried to keep up with his relentless doubles. Just as my energy began to wane, I heard familiar voices calling out. I turned my head to see Deku, Kirishima, Mina, and Shoto ascending through the air, holding hands as they floated toward me. Their uniforms glimmered faintly in the moonlight, their determined expressions giving me a glimmer of hope. "What are you all doing here?" I exclaimed, panic creeping into my voice. Deku landed in front of me, his green eyes blazing with resolve as he assumed his fighting stance. "How dare you lure the princess out by taking the light away from our city? In the name of the Almighty, I'll punish you." My eyes widened at his declaration, and I shook my head furiously. "No. It's too dangerous. Let me deal with it," I said, my voice trembling with worry. Shoto stepped forward, his gaze icy but protective. "It's our job to protect you," he said firmly. "It would be wrong to leave our princess to fight alone." Kirishima added, his usual grin replaced with an expression of steadfast loyalty. Mina gave me a reassuring smile, though there was a spark of defiance in her eyes. "We're besties, aren't we? We've got your back, princess." Their words filled me with a strange mixture of relief and frustration. I didn't want them to get hurt because of me, but I couldn't deny how comforting it was to have them by my side. The villain's laughter broke through the moment. "How touching," he sneered, his clones multiplying once again. "Let's see how far your teamwork gets you." My heart pounded as we all stood together, ready to face whatever came next. For the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. The battle raged on, the air crackling with energy as our attacks collided with the villain's doubles. Every time I thought we were making progress, they seemed to multiply, blocking our strikes and countering with new, unpredictable attacks. My heart raced as I darted around, using my quirk to float and avoid the oncoming blows, but I couldn't focus entirely on the fight. My thoughts kept flickering back to my friends, especially Deku. Suddenly, one of the villain's doubles lunged at Deku, catching him off guard. In a blur of motion, the double knocked him off the edge of the rooftop. "Deku-kyun!" I screamed, my heart leaping into my throat as I watched him plummet. My legs moved before my mind could catch up, and I sprinted toward the edge of the roof, desperate to help him. But before I could reach the precipice, I felt strong hands gripping my arms, pulling me back. I struggled against them, panic rising in my chest. "Let me go. I have to help him." "Kaken's got him." Shoto's voice came from beside me, his tone calm, but firm. Kirishima stood on the other side, his grip steady as he held me back. "You need to stay focused, 𝗬𝗏𝗍𝗔," Kirishima said, his eyes serious. "We've got to take care of the villain first." I looked down, my heart pounding in my ears. I could barely think as I watched Deku fall. But then, through the chaos, I heard it, an explosion. My breath hitched. A streak of light cut through the air, followed by another series of deafening blasts. It was Bakugo. I turned my gaze just in time to see him burst through the chaos, his explosions lighting up the night sky. He was there, flying through the air toward Deku, his arms outstretched. He slammed into the side of the building with a fierce determination, catching Deku midair with a force that nearly knocked the breath out of me. "Damn it, Deku, don't go falling like that." I heard Bakugo growl, his voice harsh as he pulled Deku into an open window. A wave of relief washed over me, and I could feel my whole body sag with it. Deku was safe. But there wasn't time to rest. I couldn't afford to let my guard down. The villain was still here, still threatening everything I cared about. I turned back to face the fight, my resolve hardening. I could hear the others shouting, coordinating their attacks as we continued to push back the villain's doubles. Each one that dissolved into nothingness felt like a small victory. I couldn't stop until the real enemy was gone. "Stay focused, Ochako," I muttered to myself, floating higher into the air, eyes narrowed in determination. "We're not done yet." The fight was far from over, but now, for the first time tonight, I felt a little less alone. Izuku's perspective as I plummeted, my life flashed before my eyes, the faces of my friends, the weight of my mission, and the fear of failure crushing me. But just as despair began to take hold, I felt a firm, familiar grip yank me back toward safety. Explosions echoed in my ears, and before I could fully comprehend what was happening, Kaken had caught me midair. He slammed us into an open classroom window, the impact rattling my body, but I was alive. My wide eyes locked onto his scowling face, and without thinking, I threw my arms around him. My tears streamed freely as I clung to him, the adrenaline and fear melting into overwhelming gratitude. "Kaken," I sobbed, my voice trembling. Thank you for saving me." Kaken stiffened for a moment, clearly caught off guard by my hug, but he didn't push me away. Instead, he let out an exasperated sigh and patted my back awkwardly, his voice low and gruff. "Get a grip, Det. You're not dying on my watch, you idiot." Sniffling, I pulled back, wiping my tears away with my sleeve. Despite the scowl on his face, there was a spark of determination in Kaken's eyes that filled me with renewed confidence. "Let's stop him together, Kaken," I said, my voice steady and my resolve stronger than ever. Kaken scoffed but smirked, his expression fierce and full of fire. "Let's go kick his butt, Deku." Without waiting for a reply, he grabbed me by the waist, his strong arms steadying me as the warmth of his touch sent an unfamiliar heat to my cheeks. Before I could dwell on it, he used his explosions to propel us back toward the rooftop, each burst of energy sending us soaring through the air like a meteor. We landed on the roof, but the moment our feet touched the ground, 𝗂𝐭𝐻 stumbled, tripping slightly as he released me. I turned to check on him, but before I could speak, the air shifted, thick with energy and malice. A sudden wave of black, pulsating light barreled toward me, freezing me in place. Sailor Deku. Izuku's desperate voice rang out, snapping me from my daze. I gasped, instinctively raising my hands to shield myself. But before the attack could reach me, 𝗂𝐭𝐻 was there. He jumped in front of me without hesitation, his body acting as a shield. The force of the light slammed into him, sending shockwaves through the rooftop. I watched in horror as his earrings shattered, the fragments scattering to the ground, and one of his shoes flew off. His body absorbed the brunt of the attack. 𝗂𝐭𝐻. I cried, my voice breaking as tears welled in my eyes again. Sailor Dynamite. He stood his ground, his body trembling slightly from the impact, but his fiery spirit burned brighter than ever. His silhouette against the dark energy was unshakable, a beacon of defiance and strength. 𝗬𝗲, he muttered, his voice strained but unwavering. Don't you dare cry. Get your butt in gear. We're not losing tonight. Katsuki's perspective. When I leaped in front of Deku, it wasn't a decision I consciously made. It was instinct, something deeper and more primal. The black energy slammed into me with an intensity that rattled my bones, knocking the wind out of me. My vision swam, and everything went dark as I felt the force course through my body. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then, I heard Deku's voice, desperate and trembling. 𝗂𝐭𝐻, open your eyes. Please open your eyes. His voice tugged at something deep inside me, pulling me back from the void. My eyelids fluttered open, but instead of seeing the rooftop, I found myself surrounded by a foggy, endless white expanse. The air was thick, like it was holding its breath, and everything was unnervingly silent. I didn't know where I was, but I wasn't alone. A figure stood before me, a girl with long curly green hair, the color of a deep, untouched forest. She was glowing faintly, her presence both familiar and foreign. Her eyes, wide and filled with sadness, locked onto mine, and I felt a pang in my chest. She called out to me, her voice soft yet filled with sorrow. She looked exactly like Deku, down to the last freckle. The same big, expressive eyes that always seemed too honest for their own good. She wore a flowing yellow dress, and her hands reached out toward me. I blinked, and the girl was gone. In her place was Deku, standing before me in the same foggy space, his expression identical to hers. Wide eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks, lips trembling as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. Is this you? I muttered, my voice hoarse. Sailor Deku. Seeing him like that stirred something in me, a strange ache in my chest, an urge to hold him, to protect him, to tell him everything would be okay. But what? Why was I feeling this way? And then, fragments of memories surged through my mind like a dam breaking. Lucian. A girl's voice cried out, clear and heart-wrenching. It was so similar to Deku's voice, but it was strained, desperate, filled with grief. Please don't leave me, Lucian. The words echoed in my ears, sharp and painful, accompanied by flashes of light and images I couldn't fully grasp. Lucian. Lucian. My breath hitched. Lucian. That name, it was my name. I wasn't just Katsuki Bakugo, I was someone else before. Lucian. The memories came flooding back in jagged pieces, fragments of another life. I had been someone else, somewhere else, and I had come back. I came back, to be with him. The girl's voice, her pleas, faded into the fog, and the memories settled into place. My chest felt heavy, like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't even known existed. I blinked again, and the fog dissipated. My vision cleared, and I saw Deku, no, Aurelius, kneeling over me, tears streaming down his face as he called my name. His voice was choked, raw with emotion. 𝗂𝐭𝐻, please, stay with me. Don't go. I lifted my trembling hand, my body weak and barely responsive. My fingers brushed his cheek, the warmth of his skin grounding me as my vision blurred again. I found you, I whispered, my voice cracking. Aurelius. Deku's eyes widened, his tears falling faster, but before I could say more, everything went dark. My hand slipped from his cheek, falling limp to my side as the weight of unconsciousness pulled me under. Izuku's perspective, I was trembling, every fiber of my being frozen with fear and desperation. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched Kaken's lifeless body, my hands trembling against his shoulders. His arms had fallen to his sides, and his chest, oh God, his chest wasn't moving anymore. Kaken. Please, open your eyes. I sobbed, my voice breaking. Behind me, I heard gasps from the other sailor guardians. Sailor Deku. Kirishima stammered, his voice heavy with shock and fear. I couldn't look away from Kaken's face. His eyes, usually sharp and burning with determination, were closed, his expression unnervingly still. Panic overtook me as I began shaking him gently, desperate for any sign of life. Don't leave me, Kaken, please. Suddenly, something shifted. A loud crack echoed through the air, and I felt an odd sensation on my hand. Looking down, I saw the yellow diamond etched into my palm shatter into countless tiny fragments. My entire body tensed as the shards dissolved into light, and a searing warmth spread across my forehead. A bright yellow diamond shape emerged on my brow, glowing so brightly it illuminated the rooftop. The diamond symbol! Achiko exclaimed, her voice trembling with shock. I barely registered her words as the glowing light on my forehead began to shift. Achiko's diamond symbol changed as well, transforming into a pink diamond, now bound to her with a thin, shimmering string that circled her head like a crown. Something's happening to Deku, Shoto murmured, his voice tinged with awe. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the surge of power coursing through me. A golden warmth enveloped my body, and when I opened my eyes again, everything felt different. My uniform had transformed into a golden tuxedo, its design shimmering with celestial detail. My hair, now longer and glowing like a radiant star, cascaded lightly over my shoulders. He's the Prince of the Sun, Achiko said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if she could hardly believe it herself. I felt my breath hitch as memories began to flood back. Memories I didn't even realize I had forgotten. The weight of them hit me like a tidal wave, and my vision blurred with fresh tears. The all-might keychain Kaken always carried floated into my hands, glowing faintly with energy. I stared at it, my fingers trembling as I clutched it tightly. Is that Deku? Kirishima asked, his voice uncertain. No, Achiko said firmly, her eyes wide with realization. That's Prince Aurelius. The name struck something deep inside me, like a chord resonating in my very soul. Memories of a past life came rushing back with startling clarity. I saw Kaken, not as Katsuki Bakugo, but as Lucian. My Lucian. I remembered his fierce smile, his unwavering determination, and his gentle moments when no one else was watching. I remembered his sacrifice. You are my one true love, Lucian, I whispered, my voice trembling as I leaned down, tears spilling freely from my eyes. The images in my mind were vivid and relentless. Lucian standing before me, shielding me from danger. His body pierced by a blade meant for me. The look in his eyes as he fell, the life fading from them. Lucian. I sobbed, my voice breaking. Why was I reborn if you were going to die again? What? I rested my forehead against his, closing my eyes as the tears continued to fall. One tear, heavier than the rest, crystallized as it left my cheek. A green diamond-shaped crystal formed, glowing with a soft, pulsating light. The crystal hovered for a moment before the light descended gently into Kaken's chest. The light seemed to seep into him, his body absorbing it until it vanished completely. Then, his chest rose and the now lightless diamond fell onto the palm of my hand. Kaken! I gasped, hope igniting in my heart as I saw him breathe again. But before I could fully process what was happening, a voice boomed out of the darkness. Get the boy. He is one for all. I turned sharply, panic flaring in my chest as the villain from earlier emerged from a portal. Before any of us could react, he grabbed Kaken's unconscious body. No. Let him go. I shouted, surging forward, but Kirishima and Shoto grabbed me, holding me back. Stay back, Sailor De. It's dangerous. Kirishima said firmly, his grip like iron. No. Please, let me go. I just got him back. I screamed, thrashing against their hold. The villain smirked as he disappeared into the portal, taking Kaken with him. Kaken! I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat as I fell to my knees, my tears hitting the rooftop like rain.